First of all of this, we can't do what they do because what if we lose power? Those are all arguments for leniency, by definition. That's not using a power available to you. Because as soon as you start playing their game, suddenly Republicans are going to remember this is not good, this should not be the norm, and will then happily join bipartisan efforts to regulate those out of the possibility space of actions you can take.
The idea that if you don't punish someone through corrupt means, that is what we're talking about. Like, be corrupt. Don't shake your head. Come on, this is obvious corruption. It's obvious corruption.
It depends on
what Brendan Carr is doing is corrupt, and you should just stand on business and just say that that's what it is. You can say it's viable.
It's not corrupt. It's not corrupt.
But the idea.
If you start doing
hold on. The suggestion that somebody doesn't endorse punishing people through corrupt means, like just because they don't want to do that, that means they're for leniency, is fucking ridiculous.
It's clear the public does not like it when we've threatened to go after Trump or threatened to go after Pam Bondi and these things, even though it would be just to do so. We might lose the Senate if we do this. So Hutch, my question is, do you do it anyway?
Hutch, well, I think it's a good question for Hutch because you two have like mind on that. I would almost say Hutch would be obligated to say that is corrupt.
Why do you do this, bro? No. We're pals, aren't we?
We are
Stop
pals.
Strawmanning me.
Whoa. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Whick TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And gang, we've got a show for you today. Speak of the devil, he comes right as we go live. We have a disagreement in the liberal world among Democrats of how to proceed if we gain power. Should we fight fire with fire? To what extent should we do what MAGA is doing to us, to them? Should we abandon any of our principles in order to beat the MAGA movement? We got some great people to talk about it, and I'd love to give the mic to them to introduce themselves, kind of give us their opening thoughts on the subject. And we're going to start by giving it to someone who's new to the show. Ryan Getty, what are your thoughts? Tell people who you are, what you do, why we should listen to you, and what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm a fan of the environment that you've tried to cultivate here. And my name is Ryan Getty. I make YouTube video essays mostly, and I sometimes stream as well. And I'm here because I've enjoyed following this conversation as it's gone back and forth between a lot of the people that you see here and also a lot of others. And whenever I saw Whick put out the call for participants in this conversation, I just thought of something that I really wanted to bring to the conversation, which is the idea that not every change that we make from the system as it exists right now is illiberal. And not everything about the system as it exists right now is, by definition, liberal. There's a lot of things that we could change about the current American system, and that would actually be a liberal thing to do. And so we'll get into it, I'm sure.
Well, thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to what you have to say. Let's get the mic to Hutch. Go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Thanks for having me on. I look forward to this conversation. So I've just been observing anecdotally for the last maybe 6 to 9 months that there's just a lot of liberals in the online space that are becoming, I would say, pretty radicalized. And I think a lot of the online vibes don't really map one-to-one with the current situation. And so I hear a lot of extreme remedies being proposed in terms of how we sort of like come back from this era of insanity, this MAGA kind of psychosis that the country's in right now. A lot of the suggestions that I hear are, number one, just completely impractical, like very implausible. There's not really like a clear path to how to get these things done. And number two, a lot of them run the, I would say, extreme risk of just blowing up in our faces and having the opposite intended consequence in terms of like empowering MAGA and weakening Democrats in the future. And so I look forward to getting into the details with you guys.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for being here, and we'll get into it as we go. Dev, please tell people who you are and what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm Dev. I've been on the show a bunch of times at this point, so most people probably know who I am if you're a Whick watcher. And also, Wick, you definitely hang out in my spaces, so all my viewers who are coming over will know who you are too. I know that this the larger conversation is Hutch, you versus Destiny on this exact topic, because you guys have had this debate before, I think. And I tend to lean more on Destiny's side than yours, just because when I look back historically, I see things like the Nuremberg trials, and I don't think anyone would call the Nuremberg trials illiberal or anti-liberal, even though they specifically built up whatever institution that was to perform those trials after the war had ended. Right? It served a specific purpose, which was to persecute the Nazis, and it was a good thing to do ultimately. So, yeah, I just don't see how, if we're going to be the American left wing should go after, well, let's say Democrats, not left wing. The American Democrats should go after MAGA, but it's not illiberal to do so. Basically, that's how I view it.
Well, we'll get into the specifics, I'm sure, as we get into it. Let's give the mic, last but certainly not least, to Stormwolf. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Stormwolf, or you can call me Rish, either one. I'm on the side that I think abandoning illiberal principles is kind of dangerous. I think there's a couple core reasons why. I think, first of all, I think Hutch kind of got at this, but I don't know if we've reached a point yet in where we are with dealing with the Trump admin as a whole, where we need to do it. And I think there's a risk to doing it as of like a backlash effect of like, once we set the precedent of like doing illiberal stuff, it treats liberalism like a tool of convenience that can kind of backfire in our face when Republicans inevitably do get power again, and they will be more brutish, they will be more willing to break liberal principles, and it'll backfire in our face. I think there's reforms and conditions to address first that can solve that problem that aren't needed, and that's kind of where I come at from in this perspective.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. And with that, I guess we'll open it up. So I guess my first question, and this is to everyone here, right? Well, specifically to Dev first, you mentioned the Nuremberg trials and setting up an institution to persecute MAGA. Can you elaborate on that? What do you think that the Democrats should do to persecute MAGA? Can you elaborate a little bit, explain what you mean?
Well, I think pretty much anyone who has cooperated with the current regime in a significant way with some of the crazier things it's done should be investigated. I think that should be the primary focus of the next DOJ.
Can you get into more? Can you flesh that out a little bit? Like, what does that mean? To what level of cooperation are you, assigning this investigation to? And then, what are you investigating them for? Like, are we talking specific crimes, or what are we talking about?
I mean, if we just look at the stuff that, look here, let's start with the cabinet, right? Because I think the cabinet's probably the easiest to start with. You look at Pete Hegseth and the shit that America's been doing. By the way, no offense to any Americans in the panel. I'm not blaming you guys specifically, okay? But like the shit that America's been doing with regards to Iran or Venezuela or a few other, the deployment of ICE, that was Kristi Noem. But still, we can look at the cabinet and we can say, hey, these are things that are completely beyond the bounds of what a proper government should be doing. Let's investigate them to see if they actually broke any laws in doing this. I think that's reasonable.
I guess my question is, if it comes out that they didn't break any laws, like let's say that like there's things they're doing that we all agree are like wrong, but they aren't necessarily legal. What then? Do they get to go through the cracks on that?
No, because I actually do think that they just have broken laws. I don't think any honest investigator or prosecutor would look at what's happened and said, oh yeah, they've done nothing. They've clearly done something. I don't think that this possibility is going to come to pass.
Well, we have a remedy for that baked into the system already. So if individual states or individual actors want to sue the federal government for some policy that they're doing on constitutional grounds or legal grounds, then it goes to the courts, and that's already happened a number of times. We've already had the lower courts and even the Supreme Court put a stop to several Trump policies at this point. My understanding is that is the remedy, and the executive branch get I don't know what the exact policy is, but they're granted like really broad latitude to pursue policy, and you rein them in by checking them at the time. I don't know if it's ever happened in the past where the next administration opened like an investigation into like the previous administration. To the extent that there are crimes being done that are outside of the like official duties of the executive branch, then of course I would support those kinds of prosecutions. I'm not sure about my debate partner. I just assume that he would be fine with that. But it sounds like you're proposing going outside of the regular order, and even invoking Nuremberg feels a bit fantastical, because I don't know what that means in the context of America. Like, we have a system already. We already have like a court system already.
Well, why does Nuremberg feel fantastical to you?
Because it was after a war where like 80 million people died, and it was just incredibly extraordinary circumstances that I don't think the current moment in the United States even comes close to that.
I mean, sure, but it was also an ideological purge of the remnants of Germany's government, right? They did a denazification program specifically because they understood that if this ideology is not ripped out, then you cannot have a functioning liberal system afterwards. And they're correct on that. And I think MAGA, even though MAGA is not, hasn't killed 80 million people, it is the same class of thing where if you allow MAGA to continue on as it is, you will not have a functioning liberal democratic republic.
So I think there's something.
If I could
go ahead, Ryan, then Stormwolf. Go ahead.
I think it's unnecessary to reach for the Nuremberg trials. I agree that that's a little outside. I mean, more than a little outside of where we are right now as a country. But I think if we could have in the next administration, Congress open an investigatory committee into corruption in the previous administration, I don't think there'd be a problem with that at all. And there's plenty of precedent for Congress investigating all sorts of things. That's a thing that Congress does all the time. I don't think that there's any need to set up a new institution to do this. I mean, it would certainly be controversial. Of course, it would be controversial to investigate the previous administration. But I don't think that's a good enough excuse to not do it. I think it was a mistake to pardon Nixon whenever he was pardoned, and the excuse at the time was that it would have been controversial and that the country just wanted to move on. I think that was an abdication of responsibility on behalf of that generation who should have thrown that guy in jail. And I think, the next time Democrats have control of Congress, they should use the powers that Congress clearly has and has used countless times.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that much. I would agree that the Nuremberg trials, we just aren't at that moment yet. And also a large portion of the Nuremberg trials, I don't know if anyone disagrees with this, but like part of the whole thing that they were doing within the Nuremberg trials was trying to eliminate any like political prosecution. They were very about like proving it. They still did investigations. They did not let the Russians appoint show judges like they wanted to. They actually didn't let like certain Jewish leaders help with the appointing of judges. They were very like clear about wanting to create this as like clear cut of a legitimate case trial. So when I hear people talk, and I don't know if Dev is arguing for this, but when I hear people talk about like doing extra legal stuff to go after people, or doing stuff that's like maybe even illiberal to go after people, or like saying we're going to prosecute anyone who cooperated, even in the Nuremberg trials, they didn't go after everyone who cooperated. They only went after like a little under 30 people associated with the Nazi regime, right? I feel like we're advocating for even worse than the Nuremberg trials, and I think even like Dev said, I don't think we're at a place worse than the Nuremberg trials when we start advocating for this.
Hold on a second. I'm reasonably sure that, for example, if you couldn't be a teacher in post-war West Germany if you remember the Nazi Party, like
just to be clear, though, Dev, is that what you're advocating for MAGA? So if you're found to be MAGA, right, in a future Democratic administration, you don't get to teach at a school?
I wouldn't go that far. No, I wouldn't go that far. It's not quite that crazy. But I mean, I think something akin to what was done after the American Civil War is probably appropriate, where it's like, okay, none of you guys can hold office again. I think that's reasonable. If you're somebody who's like if you're in the cabinet right now, you don't hold office again. Like, you're done. Well,
the issue.
Before. I want to see if Ryan agrees with that. Do you agree with your partner here? Do you think that if in the future, right, Democrat administration, should we legally bar the current administration's cabinet from holding office in America again? So say Pam Bondi wanted to run for governor or senator or Congress somewhere. Would you legally bar her from doing that?
I don't know if we could legally bar them from doing that. I don't see how we would.
If there was a legal process to do that, right? Because I'm not a lawyer.
We could impeach them after they leave office. We could impeach them, which would prevent them. They don't have to be in office to be impeached.
Sure.
We could impeach them, and then that would prevent them from holding any office ever again. In fact, that's what we should have done after January 6th to Trump, but because the Republican senators are cowards, we couldn't do it. And I mean, if we could impeach them and prevent them from ever holding office again, that'd be fine by me. But I don't think that there'd be any way to actually, like, you can't just pass a law and prevent people from holding office. That's not something that that you can do.
No, you would have to amend the Constitution.
I was also going to say, like,
If they committed crimes,
Yeah.
you could throw them in jail. I think that's a much more likely outcome. I mean, Tom Homan accepting a $50,000 bribe. This was before the administration even started. That guy should be in jail right now. He should be in jail at this very moment. And the fact that he isn't is, in fact, an insult to the principles of liberalism. One of the most important principles of liberalism is the rule of law. And his being in office right now is an insult to that. And so I think, if you're trying to bar them from holding, I don't think there's a way to just like pass a law, wave a magic wand, and prevent them from holding office. If we can impeach them and prevent them from holding office again, I'd be on board with that. But I think it's much more likely that they just, a lot of these people are corrupt and have committed crimes and probably need to be in jail.
How does that work if Trump pardons all the people?
Well,
Like,
it only
he-
applies to federal crimes.
Sure.
I don't
So
know if
you
there's any
think that,
state crime you'd be able to get them on, though. I feel like this is one thing that I feel like I've heard. Like, I don't know what state crime you would, like, for example, if we were to take like Hegseth or Bondi and the violations within their office, a lot of those are violations to federal laws. I don't know how you get them on like state charges then.
No, I mean, if you can't, then you can't. But I'm asking for people to try and not write it off before it's been tried. I mean, I can't recite to you the law code of all 50 states in America, of course. But I think that we should try.
So I'm on board with accountability. I supported all the prosecutions of Donald Trump. I think the concern that I have is that a lot of the rhetoric seems to indicate that we should kind of bend the rules or bend the system, or maybe even suspend the system entirely for a short time because the urgency of this moment requires it. I don't know if I quite understand the logic there, because I keep being told that if we punish them, that's going to be the way that we sort of teach Republicans in this country that they can't get away with this kind of stuff. But I don't understand like where that idea comes from. They, indicted Roger Stone. He was found guilty. They indicted Steve Bannon. He was found guilty. They indicted Rudy Giuliani. They did a whole RICO indictment for like 24 people in Georgia. Donald Trump was handed 4 sets of indictments. He was found guilty of 34 felonies. At any point, did it indicate, or did Republicans indicate that they were like backing down because of that? If anything, it just, hyped them up even more. Which, to be clear, I'm not just. I'll finish up real quick, but like, I'm not saying don't prosecute them for fear that it might like backfire. I'm pushing back against the idea that if we did prosecute them, that would be the thing that would like chill them out and calm them down. I just don't see a lot of good evidence for that.
Well, this is why I keep emphasizing the need for congressional action. If you'd excuse my use of an analogy here, does everyone remember what Al Capone was thrown in jail for?
Tax evasion.
For tax evasion, right? He wasn't thrown in jail for being a mobster, right? Eventually, though, I think it took until the 70s, we passed racketeering laws, which allowed us to throw people like Al Capone in jail. What we've been doing so far, and what I think a lot of people probably are erroneously suggesting as a final like fix to the to MAGA, to the abuses of power by the Trump administration, is the equivalent of getting Al Capone on tax fraud. Which is a good thing to do. Al Capone was a horrible gangster, and he should have been in jail. He's responsible for the death of, a lot of people. He should have been in jail. And so getting him on tax fraud was not a bad thing. But it wasn't a fix to the problem, because so the point that I'm trying to make here is that just in the same way that further laws were needed to address the problem of organized crime in this country, and so we had to pass racketeering laws, Congress needs to take action to prevent something like this from happening again.
Well,
that's the only way that something is going to be prevented from happening again.
Just real quick. What does that look like? So you say it's it's not a final solution. What would be your final solution?
Jesus Christ.
So you say take action. Okay, take action. What do you want them to do?
What do I want Congress to do?
Yeah. I
want Congress to pass laws. Well, there's a lot of things I'd like Congress to do, and all of these have to do with making the country more liberal. So first thing I'd like Congress to do is eliminate the filibuster, because there's basically no way that any of this is going to happen without eliminating the filibuster. The filibuster, in my mind, is a illiberal institution anyway. It was an efficiency reform, the silent filibuster anyway, that's only existed since the 1970s, and it's just gotten totally out of hand. So eliminate the filibuster. That's number one. Congress needs to set up a committee to investigate corruption. This needs to be Republicans and Democrats. Ideally, people like Bob Menendez need to go to jail as well, for taking gold bars from the Egyptian government or whatever. But people in the Trump administration are corrupt. If we want, I can go through all, Elizabeth Warren for 100 days of Trump being in office, read into the record 100 instances of illegal corruption by the Trump administration. That type of stuff needs to be punished. Congress should also try and assert its authority to rein in the power of pardons. The pardon, as it exists right now, is a crazy institution. If Congress is able to do anything, they should try and do it. Congress. So I already mentioned the investigating committee. We should try and be adding states to the union, Puerto Rico and DC most notably. But I mean, frankly, they deserve representation, and I think it's bad that they don't have representation, and it would probably be good for Democrats as well. And Congress should also do Supreme Court reform. Congress should be pushing for the Supreme Court to, I don't know whether we're talking about either standardizing the amount of justices that are on the Supreme Court, or, a binding code of ethics for Supreme Court justices so they can't take cases whenever they have business dealings with the people who are before the court. All of these things are things that Congress could do to try and root out corruption. But that's enough time.
Dev, sure. I'm curious, do you agree with those, or would you want to go further than that?
I certainly agree with all of those, yes. But I've been taking notes here just so I can comment on a few things, I think. I think, Hutch, both you and Stormwolf said something to the effect of, that going after MAGA is not going to calm them down. It's not going to make them de-radicalize. But I think the honest truth is they just invent reasons to be radical anyway. Like, they say so much stuff has happened that actually hasn't happened, and they use that as a pretext to go even further. And they don't need an excuse to be more brutish. They just invent excuses. So I don't think what Democrats do is going to change that much.
But that doesn't really respond. That doesn't really respond to my. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, Hutch, then Stormwolf. Go ahead.
I was going to say that doesn't really respond to my point, though. I'm not saying that they won't find a reason to go ham. I'm saying that punishing them has not demonstrated that it would dissuade them in the future. I mean, it just, they keep doing the fuckery. And so it sounds like you're saying that we should consider extraordinary measures because we have I don't know if this is what you said. This is what kind of the argument other people are making. I don't know. Maybe you could actually, you know what? I don't want to assume anything. So just tell me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I do think the solution to that problem that you just brought up is to punish them harder and punish them until they break, basically, because it needs to happen at this point. Things are going to get better otherwise.
Elaborate on that. Punish them harder.
Yes.
Give us examples.
Yes, as in, I don't know. I think that every single person who is in Trump's cabinet should be facing charges as soon as a Democrat president is in office. And I think that basically the job of the Democrats from now until they win is to basically, in behind the scenes, kind of set up what they're going to be doing in terms of prosecutions, and then get that rolling immediately.
So you would concede that punishing them hasn't dissuaded them yet. You think that we just haven't punished them hard enough. And then if we do that, then it'll just fundamentally change the Republican Party, and I guess they'll go in a more Rubio direction.
I think if they take enough L's, yeah, and they have not taken nearly enough L's for that to happen yet.
I mean, so here's where I'm at. I feel like I might even grant that it's possible that they're more dissuaded. I also grant that I feel like it's also fair to say that it might invigorate them more. I mean, you can look at the Twitter files when they thought they were being censored. You can look, and you're right, they do make up stuff, but that stuff is always used to justify things. And if you have an actual, what they feel is an actual political prosecution, imagine how upset they're going to get. And the idea of punishing them, dissuading them, I don't buy it. I mean, we can look at the Al Capone example, and the analogous thing would be Trump getting charged on those state crimes. And whether or not you think they were legitimate, I think they were fine. But that didn't really dissuade Trump, did it? Nothing of that dissuaded anyone. It wasn't okay, even if they can't get us for these higher charges like the insurrection, they're going to get us anyways. It didn't dissuade anyone.
That's true, but in my opinion, it's only because Trump won in 2024. Like, if let's say Kamala Harris won 2024, right? And now here we are 2 years later, it's 2026. What do you think would have happened to the MAGA movement? Because Trump would be in jail.
Oh, they would.
And I think
they would have been in a lot of trouble. But I think Trump winning in 2024 was just a temporary Band-Aid. I think we were always headed for this moment right now, which is, just to be clear about what the situation is currently, the current state of the MAGA movement and the Republican Party is they are fully collapsing. Now, I'm not saying to get complacent and that the Democrats can just coast, because they have their own problems too. But, I think that they would have had a really tough time finding a successor and keeping that movement going if Donald Trump had lost and ended up in prison.
Also, wait, just a thing. You say like, oh, well, that only happened because Trump won. But also then, like, why aren't we seeing people think, I feel like we're not seeing this admin chill out now they see Dems are winning the midterms Republican and like they're losing their support, right? It feels like this admin's still going full scale ahead, right? So I'm curious, like, this admin knows that that's probably in the future, except it just doesn't seem like they care.
Isn't that a point against what sort of you and Hutch are saying?
Well, I'm saying that it means that prosecution isn't
yes.
enough, and I'm saying extra legal stuff doesn't seem to they don't seem to care about it either. I'm saying I see no reason why punishing them is that's what I'm like. I'm not saying punishing them is bad, but I feel like it's better to focus on reforms and stuff, because I feel like you're always going to have bad faith actors in the system. I think it's like in Madison wrote in Federalist 51 about how no men are like angels or whatever. It's about making your system strong enough. I feel like when we look to these extra legal stuff, we're almost setting precedents of illiberal stuff. We're almost setting precedents of look, we're going to do illiberal stuff, and then MAGA can use it, or whatever the future is, to use it Jessiah and say, okay, now we need to do illiberal stuff to get revenge, and then there's just going to be more brutish, and it creates this endless cycle is my concern.
So here's the thing. I don't view it as illiberal, fundamentally. I think it's well within the bounds of liberalism as a political philosophy to do some of this stuff. This actually leads into the second note that I wrote down. You talked about suspending the rules, Hutch. Do you believe that suspending the rules temporarily is actually an illiberal action?
It really depends on the context. Like if you're doing it in an existential moment, a truly existential moment, then I would say no. But right now, I don't think we are in a truly existential moment.
Well, Democrats can't do it right now anyway, right? So but I guess what I mean is if you look back to the COVID lockdown era and you look at what a lot of the libertarians were saying back then, they were making arguments basically from liberalism. They're saying, hey, our speech is being restricted on these social media platforms. Our right.
And there was a remedy for people to challenge those policies in court if they thought that it was against the Constitution or illegal or whatever.
Yes. No, I completely agree with you. This is why I don't think that suspending the rules temporarily for a good reason is fundamentally illiberal. Because I think you can have an emergency situation where you do actually like something big's going down and you do actually have to suspend the rules just for a bit to handle the crisis, and then you put the rules back into place. I don't think that's fundamentally illiberal. I think you can definitely say
it's just not analogous.
Yeah, my thing is I don't know if we're at the moment where we need to step outside the system. Looking at let's say we win the House and Senate and then we win the presidency in 2028. I don't know if we need to start doing things that might be considered illiberal or suspend the rules, because I feel like we have the tools within our system to pass meaningful reforms, to go after people for corruption. I don't know if we necessarily need to step. And I guess to kind of center it, this might take us back a little bit, but when we say because at least I was under when we say we want to abandon liberal principles, what does that look like? I guess because it seems like we all agree prosecuting can be within the liberal context. So what is the disagreement here between our prosecution methods is what I guess I'm getting at.
I think that
I'm not actually sure. I'm not actually sure if there is one, to be honest. I mean, because I was talking to you about this before the show, Whick. I said I think that our main disagreement is going to be on words, not necessarily on what we actually want to do. Because I just don't think that some of the things that to appeal back to that earlier conversation, when you and Hutch, when you and Destiny were talking, some of the things he was outlining were not necessarily illiberal. They were still doable within the current system.
Well, this goes back to Ryan's point, how not everything that's within the system is liberal, and not everything that's outside the system is illiberal. That is true.
Oh, true.
I actually really agree with that. But for example, when we're talking about stretching the definition of what you can do as far as possible as you can, so you can get away with it, even though it's technically within the system, I feel like that is kind of going against the spirit of a lot of our systems in the liberalism, right? When you're talking about using extra legal means to go after people, that does seem like it's in the spirit of going against the rule of the law, even if it's technically within our system.
The whole, if I may jump in here to maybe spark a little debate here, the whole idea of deciding that someone is guilty and then you're going to investigate them until you find what they're guilty of, and then you're going to prosecute them for whatever you find, feels very illiberal to me. It feels very much against the spirit of what our justice system is looking to do. Like, if you have something specific that you think that one of these cabinet members have done, like Hexether things, blowing up the Venezuelan boats and things like that, you think it's against the DoD law of war and things like that, by all means. But the idea of like saying, hey, we're pretty sure you did something wrong. We're going to look into you till we, find me the man, I'll find you the crime kind of deal. It feels very liberal to me.
I think this is a good point because I think that with a lot of these people, it's much more analogous to the first situation you laid out, where there's something that's pretty clearly against the law. It's not like we're going on a fishing expedition to look for something. It's just out in the open. Like for example, Trump is probably going to try and take that $400 million Qatari jet with him whenever he leaves office, right? He's probably going to try and take it with him and use it for his own private property. He's probably going to do that, right? Do we agree that that's something he's probably going to try and do?
Seems very Trumpy.
Yeah.
That's illegal. If he tries to do that, that's stealing from the U.S. government. He's not allowed to accept that on behalf of his private person. If he's accepting it, he's accepting it on behalf of the U.S. government. So I mean that's going to be illegal, and there's a whole host of other things that we could talk about that are pretty clearly.
There was some reporting today that apparently Corey Lewandowski there were some DHS contractors that were told to send money directly to Lewandowski, which was reported at
Insane.
Wall Street Journal. There's also been previous reporting that people like Giuliani and maybe Roger Stone were basically like selling pardons, accepting payments to petition the president to hand out pardons. And so, I agree with you. There's a lot of stuff that's happening out in the open. And the way that you do it in a very kind of clean way is similar to what they did with like the January 6th Select Subcommittee. The Congress.
Yeah, I think that's a good model.
Yeah, the Congress only has so much bandwidth. And, typically the American voters only give political parties 2 years of a trifecta before they take it away in the midterms. And so, you wouldn't want to grind the entire Congress to a halt just investigating like 50 cabinet members, because I also want them focused on legislation and doing some of the reforms that you were talking about. Ryan, I support, getting rid of the filibuster. I support term limits for judges and, redefining the pardon power if you can do that through legislation. And I just feel like if the Democrats are just like holistically focused on, going after the previous administration in a Nuremberg 2.0 type situation, you're kind of burning valuable time that you need to actually codify reforms and deliver legislation that helps people out in their day to day.
Well, the great thing about doing this stuff through Congress is you don't have to wait until you control the presidency. If the Democrats win big in November, we can start doing this before Trump's out of office. We can start doing it. We can start investigating these people, which is why it's so important for everyone to, even in states like mine in Texas that are going to be tough to win, it's important to get out and try and make it happen. So anyway, sorry.
Just on that note, I know it's a slightly aside, but I'm just very curious. Do you worry that this will be ammo for the opposition to say, look, instead of putting food on your table, instead of lowering prices, instead of working on things that will actually help you and your family, there's the Democrats, there they go again, prosecuting their political rivals, and it just becomes propaganda from the other side. There is a good argument that the political prosecutions against Trump actually led him to victory. Or helped him to victory in 2020?
I don't know. At this point, we're talking about what are the electoral implications on something that's multiple elections away, and I feel like it's just impossible to say.
Well, I don't know if it's
if you don't mind me jumping
in, though. Like, we could look at things and we could think like, okay, doing this action is going to probably hurt us in these different ways, and we could say whether or not that's worth doing. But if you had a crystal ball and you knew that by implementing and concentrating on implementing and on going after and opening these investigations would hurt us and help and lose us the Senate and lose us the House in 2030, would you still do it?
Right, but I don't have a crystal ball.
Well,
Sure.
I don't
can I
have
jump
a
in here for a
crystal ball.
second? So, like, I think one thing for me is when we look at like why Trump rose up, and I think this is kind of important when we talk about what we should do. I think the primary thing that seems to motivate it is a lack of faith in the system. And I think Democrats need to focus on restoring faith in the system in many ways for both their own base and the opposing base. I think I was watching Hutch's conversation with Destiny and Luksha, and I think one thing he talked about was like the corruption messaging. I think a huge issue is corruption. I think another thing is that I feel like a lot of people, the reason they were quick to abandon liberalism was because, especially with the MAGA base, with swing voters in general, is they feel liberalism is failing them. They look at their lives, they feel like, okay, I feel like I'm not making enough. I feel like shit's getting expensive. I feel like it's difficult. And I think we need to stop looking at like, how do we stop MAGA, and rather, how do we deal with the conditions? How do we make sure the conditions that led to MAGA don't rise again? I think we bring up World War I and World War II, the Nazis a lot, but part of the post-Nazi plan was looking at how they treated Germany after World War I and comparing that to World War II, right? This idea of like being really harsh on them and like really like demilitarizing them and like weakening them. Ended up at least the governments on the world said that wasn't the right strategy because it made them ripe for fascism, because you have this group of people that were primed for a nationalist authoritarian person to come promise to make them stronger, right? I think what you need to do is you need to pass reforms that fix the system and restore faith in the system. You need to go after corruption, and it should be a bipartisan committee that people don't feel is political, but feel like it's about going after corruption as a whole in the government. And you need to make liberalism work for the people, right? I think those are your primary concerns. If prosecutions come about from that, that's fine, but I don't think that should be the goal as much as it should be an example of the system finally working.
So I want to agree with your general thrust of what you're saying. That should be the goal, but I want to quibble with the idea that you're right, after World War I, we were harsh on Germany, and then after World War II, we thought about, well, we shouldn't be harsh. We didn't let them be a country again for decades. We were harsh. We just were harsh in a different way. And so maybe if I could modify what you're saying, we need to be more strategic about what we're doing. And that's why, earlier I made the analogy of, there's a lot of people talking about trying to get, the equivalent of Al Capone on tax fraud. And what I'm saying is the only way back to institutional stability for the United States is with serious congressional action, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has to be done through Congress. I also think it has to not feel, but like I was saying, I think it also has to feel like it's working for like the broad sweeping of American people. It can't
Absolutely.
Just be something, yeah. It can't just be about like liberals going after Republicans, because that's not going to help anyone.
There's a quote from there's almost done. There's a quote from Rousseau that I like that's really relevant here, and it sort of guides a lot of what I think about whenever I'm thinking about how to manage this stuff. And he says in the social contract, he says, the most important law of all is not carved on marble or brass, but in the hearts of the citizens. It keeps the people in the habits of their founding, and it substitutes the force of habit for that of authority. I'm speaking of mores and customs, and above all of opinion, a subject which is unknown to our political theorists, but on which the success of all other laws depends. So unless people think, the reason I say that is because unless people think it's legitimate for us to be making these prosecutions or whatever, then it won't matter, because we will have just done more to undermine the system. Now that doesn't get rid of the necessity for action to be taken against the Trump administration, but it does necessitate that we do it in such a way that we make people understand that this isn't just about going after people because they're Republicans. It's about going after them because they're criminals.
So I agree with all that, but I think the ultimate issue is, if after it's all said and done, if the people who have obviously committed crimes do not get punished for that, I think you will just have MAGA again in the next cycle. There has to be something else.
Well, I don't agree. I think if you address the reasons MAGA rose up, which is, I think, twofold. One, people not trusting the system, and then two, people feeling like liberalism wasn't working because not only was there lack of faith in the system, because their own material lives weren't super functioning. I think you're more likely to have MAGA than if you simply let people get away. If people see the corruption prosecution, say, yeah, those people got away, but we prosecuted corruption, we're showing we're making an effort against corruption. I think people across the aisle will have a faith in the system. If you get, like, for example, Kristi Noem with a $220 million, or like with that like advertisement thing, if we find out that was some kind of linked to some corruption thing, right? If we get that, liberals will be happy. And if we also showed like Bob Menendez, I mean, he did get convicted and sentenced, of course, but like instances like that, or like the Eric Adams case, like these types of things, I think you get a broad sweeping allegiance of people restoring their faith in liberalism, which makes the likelihood of another illiberal movement rising up a lot less likely.
So I agree. I agree with all this as well. But I'm not necessarily talking about the average person who sees their life getting better or worse and then making choices. I'm talking about the actual people in power in the Republican Party, where if they get away with it this time, they're going to be saying to themselves, "Fuck it, let's just do it again. Let's just lie and cheat and steal again. Fuck it, we're not getting prosecuted for this shit. Let's just do it again."
Well,
that has to be stopped.
Well, that's why
they won't have the political capital for it.
Oh, go ahead, Hutch. I want to hear from Hutch.
Sorry.
Well, that's why you do reforms. Like you do the reforms to fill in these gaps, to rein in the executive, to rein in the power of the pardon, and to decrease the likelihood of this happening again in the future. Like the reforms that we do that Congress could codify would do way more to prevent future Trumps than taking extraordinary measures to incarcerate Trump. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what like when you say reforms, can you give us examples so we can know? Because just saying reforms doesn't really help.
Well, I mean, Ryan touched on a few of them. I mean, like, first of all, it's just really hyper-polarized in this country, and so it's difficult to imagine either party getting to 60 votes, and as such, it's just impossible to get anything done unless you get rid of the filibuster. So that would have to go, like, day one. And then after
Are you worried, though, if getting rid of I know this isn't the debate topic, but if we didn't have the filibuster, we'd have the SAVE Act, and that would be
I think like my best guess as to how that would play out is that I do think it would be quite volatile in the beginning, but if the Republicans want to use simple majorities to get rid of legislation that people end up liking, like the ACA, then ultimately I think they'll pay a political price for that. And so I think like most countries in the world do these things by simple majority. I don't understand why America can't. I understand.
We used to.
Yeah, right. I mean, I do understand the downsides. I really do. I mean, I'm glad that the filibuster is a thing now because we can block the SAVE Act, right? But it's just outlived its usefulness, and it's just untenable. Obama told Brian Tyler Cohen in a recent interview, I mean, he got on board with getting rid of it because the structural imbalances are just getting worse in terms of like the population disparity, the representation in Congress and the Senate. It's just completely untenable to keep that rule in place. And then once you do that, I leave it to better minds to come up with like wonky policies to, prevent future Trumps. But that part, honestly, like getting into the substance of that stuff is not as important. It's just the general idea of like codifying actual reforms. I think that's way more important than punishing the previous administration by, putting them in jail and making a public thing of it. Deb, I have a question for you though.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on the possibility of if a Democrat is sworn in 2028 and they have a trifecta, and then I assume you want this to be spearheaded by the president, right? Or I don't want to assume, but would you want Newsom to be the person who's proposing these like investigations and all that?
I think probably the best way to do it is for the president to at least publicly be hands off and kind of maintain the impartiality of the DOJ. But whoever the president is should basically be putting in an attack dog as the head of the DOJ.
Well, I don't disagree with that. So it's hard to know what we disagree about if you don't get into like more specifics.
Well, here, let me put it this way, okay? Because I've been taking notes. Let's say that no one ends up getting prosecuted, dragged into court, thrown into jail from Trump's administration, all right? And then let's say in 2032, Vance just says, fuck it, let's just do MAGA 2.0. I'm going to lie, I'm going to cheat and steal. I'm going to propagandize people on Twitter to the best of my ability. Who fucking cares? And they just do the same thing again. That's what has to be prevented. And I think part of preventing that is punishing the people involved right now.
So punishing can help with that. But kind of what I was getting at earlier is part of the reason Trump's able to get away with so much is that he has this political capital. And part of that is because he has a group of people he can appeal to that don't trust the system, right? So when they hear him talk about like the deep state, when they hear him talk about like all this other bullshit, they feel motivated and they feel like, look, he's fighting for us, even if he's not. The reason why he's able to get away with his lies and no one cares is because they feel like, well, everyone lies, right? You need to show people that liberalism can work. And this is why I keep going back to like this, making the system work for people removes the threat. Yep. And that involves both like the material conditions and the reforms that stop the ability for those lies to be effective and for that bad faith actors to be effective, right? If you don't have the political capital to do it, you won't have the Senate votes, you won't have the House votes, and even if you do, people are going to be very skeptical of doing it because they know, like, especially I think midterms now showed that when you overextend your mandate like this, you get fucked.
Yeah, Storm.
Yeah,
Was,
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you.
So
It's just that I think that a necessary part of this is punishing the people who are currently in power. I think that has to be part of what you're talking about here.
Okay, so Storm kind of touched on where I was going with the question, and it's actually for both of you guys, for Ryan and Dev here. But are you at all concerned about if the Democratic Party as like an institution, if they frame this push for accountability, if it's an explicitly kind of partisan push for this kind of thing, are you at all concerned about the public perceiving that as overreach?
I don't think it should be framed as a partisan thing. I think that would be a bad idea. I think it should be framed as an anti-corruption thing.
This would be more for Dev then, I guess. Well, you agree with
No,
that too?
I agree. Yeah,
I legitimately don't know what we disagree about.
I think the difference is that like the Republicans, I mean, Democrats aren't perfect by a long shot, but the Republicans are just blanket worse than Democrats right now. So even applying the law in a neutral manner, we'll see more Republicans get caught in the net than Democrats.
Okay, so what?
So it's always gonna appear as partisan even when it's not.
Wait, can you just tell me what you think you and I disagree about?
I think the main disagreement is that I don't believe that temporarily suspending the rules during an emergency situation is fundamentally illiberal. I think you can do that within a liberal system.
Okay, but what does it mean to suspend the rules? What does that mean? What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, I mean, for a long time, the norm was you don't prosecute previous presidents, and that has to be thrown away now. It just has to be.
Well, that's not like suspending the system or going outside of the system.
I think maybe this is the genesis of how I ended up on this side as well, because I would have assumed that you would have thought that kind of thing would be an unacceptable break from the current system and therefore illiberal. Hutch.
I think
it depends on where it comes from. Like, so if you do it your way, where if it comes from Congress, like what the January 6th select subcommittee did was they did a legit investigation for like 6 to 9 months, and they made criminal referrals to DOJ, and Jack Smith ended up using those referrals to inform his indictments. And so like that is like a special counsel. I mean, the very concept of a special counsel exists to instill a faith in the process on the part of like voters, the electorate, so they don't see it as this explicitly partisan thing. But all of that is within the bounds of what I would call acceptable. It's just the rhetoric these days has been more explicit calls for like Newsom himself to get out in front and announce that they're gonna, surgically target the previous administration, and it would be framed in this like really partisan way. But Deb, I still don't really understand what you mean when you say suspend the rules, because you can do that. That's fine.
I guess what I mean is I remember seeing it was the Kinzinger movie. Did you guys watch that recently? I saw that the Kinzinger movie.
I have not seen it yet.
I did not see that movie. No.
Okay, one of the things that they briefly touched on was that a congressional committee had not ever recommended charges to the DOJ before until the J6 committee. And there were a lot of people who said that, okay, that's not technically illegal, but you are doing something that has never been done before. It's unprecedented. It feels like now you're going outside at least the norms of the system. And I mean, maybe they were, but insofar as they were, it was still the right thing to do. And it wasn't fundamentally illiberal to do so.
I guess when I hear you say suspend the rules, I guess when I hear you say suspend the rules, my mind doesn't go to like not follow norms. When I hear suspend the rules, my mind goes to Destiny's more extreme prescriptions, like, maybe renditioning the Supreme Court to a black site or Mar-a-Lago if they're poised to hand down a decision that he doesn't like.
So I think that level of stuff isn't off the table, but things have to be a lot worse. I mean, again, the libertarians are fundamentally correct when they say the Second Amendment is there so that you can shoot your politicians if you have to, and America's not there yet.
What
could be?
Hold on. What would so say midterms comes around, for whatever reason we lose the midterms, we don't get the House, we don't get the Senate. There's a giant upset. What wasn't on the table previously now becomes on the table to you guys.
Well, is it a real loss? First off,
let's assume that it's unclear. It's unclear. It's the day after. There's suspicion, but we don't know.
You challenge your courts.
You get sad and you be sad for like 2 to 4 months. You lick your wounds, and then you start thinking about special elections, off-cycle election, and the midterms. You know,
Wait, I'm confused. Is the scenario here where they've stolen the election, where we no longer have free and fair elections in the country?
No,
Is that
we don't. Again,
or we just
veil of
lost
ignorance
fair and
here.
square?
You don't know why we lost. It's the day after. There's been no
we don't know
postmortem.
if it was stolen or not.
Yes.
well,
That changes my answer. If
Okay.
it
Well,
was stolen
let's
or
see
not.
the answer. Say it was. They did some fucky wucky shit. Sent some ICE people to various polling locations. The Supreme Court said that was fine to do, and it's obvious that they obviously repressed the vote, but it wasn't entirely illegal for what they did, right?
I mean, if they're suppressing the vote, I mean, I think that's about the time you need to start getting people.
shut it down.
You need to
Shut it
start like I don't know, what do they call it? What did they call it in Florida when in 2000 whenever the Republicans
Brooks Brothers
like
riot.
yeah, I mean it's about the time that type of stuff becomes necessary.
I don't even really like.
if they're actually stealing the election.
So if it depends what we mean by stealing. So if it's just like ICE officers being there and like repressing vote, it's fucked and it's really bad. I don't know if that can warrant. Like I think revolution needs to be your last literal. But if it's like an actual stolen election, like what happens in like Iran or like whatever, where like the vote is clearly going, or like in what happened last Venezuelan election, where the vote was clearly for some people, and then they just like said no, actually no, and there's no like. I think that's a lot different of a situation. Like for example, would you say that after Al Gore and Bush that we should have been like revolting?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, or like whatever you're like. I don't know what you're implying. Like, are you saying what should we have done after Al Gore and Bush? Then would be my next question, right?
Well, the Supreme Court ruled that the recount had to stop. So unfortunately, there was not much more that could be done at that point. But like if they are sending ICE officers, as I'm understanding this scenario, if they're sending ICE officers to turn people away at the polling places, they're not doing that's a world beyond.
It's just to maybe clarify, they're not saying they obviously wouldn't say we're doing it to suppress the vote and turn people away. They're protecting the integrity of the vote.
I don't even like getting into these hypotheticals, to be honest with you, because I feel like the doomer stuff, I'm afraid that people are going to hear it and they're going to be less motivated to vote if they think that MAGA's legit going to steal it. It's going to be really, really, really difficult for them to like steal the midterms or steal the next election. They can do some like process fuckery. Republicans have been doing that for years with like different like voter ID measures and redistricting or whatever.
Try, though?
No, I mean, like, look, if they send ICE agents to polling booths, I'm telling you, it's going to boost turnout by like 10 or 20%. It's going to have the opposite.
I think that might be true.
It's going to have the opposite.
You ever heard the Streisand effect?
I think that might be
it's like
true.
the Streisand effect. Like,
It will,
we try to suppress it.
1000%.
Happened with Cal Rico.
It
Yeah.
1000%. It'll energize the Democratic voter base to such an insane degree. I'm just so sure of that. And, our election systems are extremely fucking secure. So, but, if we think that there's fuckery in some county, like literally votes were manipulated, we have audits, we have recounts. These are done, with Republican and Democrat like witnesses that watch the whole thing. So it's just really, really difficult to switch votes in a voting machine and get away with it. It's just really hard to do that.
What I was trying to say is like the reason why I asked about the Al Gore Bush thing is because I feel like what's being described, I think, is kind of honestly a little bit similar, where like people are being maybe disincentivized to vote, or their vote isn't able to be counted, because the whole thing with the Al Gore shit was like some bullshit with the way the ballots were printed, right? And like a bunch of fuckery there, and the recount not being able to go through. I think that like in the situation Wick has described, I feel like you don't. I know it sounds like really weird to be like, okay, they're fucking with elections, but it's not time to like abandon the system yet entirely. It might warrant some other actions in the presidential election, like maybe having like state governors deploying their National Guard to be there with ICE to like kind of counteract ICE or whatever. I would have to think about it more, because again, this is a crazy kind of situation. But I think, assuming elections are still possible, if it's just an intimidation tactic, I think then like I don't know how much you warrant it. If they're actually being like, no, you can't vote and you can't vote, then that would warrant more drastic action.
Well, I agree. If they're just sending people to sit outside no, I think Hutch is probably right. That would probably increase turnout, not reduce it.
Probably. Let me read some super chats and we'll get to the discussion once again, but I do need to make a little money today, so I appreciate that. And if you have a super chat and you want to ask these lovely gentlemen a question, if you have a comment that you want to share, by all means, give me money and I'll do that. $5 from Zontar Dow. Americans don't know this, but the Trudeau-Carney Liberals are MAGA with Canadian characteristics, right down to a need for Nuremberg to reestablish law. Well, thank you for the $5. Canadians, I don't know what to tell you. Dev, that seems like a problem you need to solve. Anand's Spider.
He's wrong, TLDR.
For $10 says, this is for Hutch. Before MAGA, Republicans fought and won in courts to legally disenfranchise voters. I'm talking about cases like Shelby County versus Holder. How should liberals fight back?
I mean, the best way, honestly, I think like there's two things that are going to stop MAGA in the short and long run. And one of them is winning elections and the other one is doing reforms. And so the first step here is just to win elections. Just win as many fucking elections as you possibly can. Run moderate candidates in purple districts. Endorse maybe even slightly conservative Democrats in red districts. Just like expand the map. It's going to be really difficult to do stuff if we can't win elections. But if we do, then, and I'm talking about at the state level as well. And then you challenge them in the courts. But I don't know what other thing you're suggesting here. I don't think that meets the threshold for get out there and do basically kind of like a quasi-revolution.
$5 for Testicle Johnson. Newsom needs to call Trump the F slur. Dems will win a landslide. Well, $5, I suppose. $2 from Anand's Spider says, Wick, can't we message better then? I'm assuming you're referring to my comment about messaging on political prosecutions and things like that. I mean, we could, but will that help? I don't know. $2 from the Goodman says, anyone recall the Andersonville event? Does anyone know what that is? I don't.
No.
Feel free to elaborate. $10 from Oversized Trash Can says, elections are won at the margins. Ignore Uber MAGA. They'll see any consequences as political. Worry more about overstepping your bounds with swing voters while doing your punishing. Thank you for the $10. And to that, again, like one of the reasons that Trump is losing right now and MAGA is losing is because
perceived as corrupt.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but they see the prosecutions against Comey and other things, and they really don't like political prosecutions. So I guess my concern is that all this talk about we need to go after the Trump cabinet and this has to happen, it just seems to be counter effective when it comes to actually getting votes and winning elections. It might help the system, but it doesn't help us win elections. In fact, there's some evidence that it hurts us winning elections.
There's a clear path right now for Democrats, and they're already doing it, to run anti-corruption platforms, like center their platforms on kitchen table issues, as they say, or affordability. But, you can definitely talk about government corruption. There's a heavy anti-establishment kind of vibe going on in this country where it's perceived that, politics are inherently corrupt. And right now, Donald Trump is just embodying just the very worst of that kind of sentiment. And so if Democrats, run smart campaigns and win elections and then do corrupt things, we're just fumbling the ball. Like this would be, I agree, like with Storm. I honestly would take it so much further in terms of like trying to restore faith in the institutions. In my fantasy, day one that, President Newsom or whoever is inaugurated, or whenever they get their attorney general confirmed, they do a joint press conference and the president explains, because it seems like a lot of people just don't know about the post-Nixon reforms and the fact that the DOJ is supposed to be independent. There's not supposed to be any kind of direction from the president as far as like specific people. He can kind of give policy goals, but not like go after this person, go after that person. Like it would be a really good opportunity for the next Dem president to get up there and explain why that norm exists and just like double and triple and quadruple down on that norm. Look the attorney general in their face and say, if I ever call you and tell you to, prosecute this or that Republican, I want you to go to the media right away, resign, whatever. Like, I think you do need to start taking significant actions to restore faith in our institutions, because if that doesn't change, then we're going to be on this merry-go-round for decades.
I mean, I think one person, just to piggyback off of, like, when you look at like potential nominees, I think one person people are really looking towards is Ossoff, precisely because he has that kind of messaging. Talarico as well is gaining popularity because of that kind of messaging. I think that's kind of like the what's really I think not winning, but like that seems to be like what's gaining steam right now, at least from my perception.
Any other comments on that one, or we're gonna keep moving?
I mean, I just would emphasize the need for something a little more concrete than just the president making statements. I mean, I agree. You know, it's necessary to restore faith in the institutions, but I would just emphasize the need for Congress to take action to make that more concrete.
I don't think Hutch disagrees. I think Hutch was just saying, like, on a day one thing that he should inform people.
Yeah.
I'm sure Hutch would agree that like a more formalized rule law saying the president and DOJ have more independence is not a bad thing.
Actually, I have a
Right,
question
but that
for you
on
guys
its
who
own.
want.
Okay, well,
sorry.
Go ahead.
we're
go
gonna
ahead,
get
go
to your question, Dev. I want to make a little more money. We got a few.
ahead. Okay, sure.
Super chats. $10 from J Ray. Get rid of the filibuster, pack the Supreme Court, challenge pardons, and have the Supreme Court rule that the president can't pardon himself or his staff for time in office. Solves two issues: pardon power and allows for accountability. Thank you for the $10. $5 from Gelatinous Rube. Are we really going to put Hutch in prison for his false slate of electors?
Ash is trolling. Ash is trolling.
Okay,
He was talking
if
about
Hutch
this before.
has
He's
ever
just
put
trolling.
out a false state of electors, then I think we should prosecute him. But I don't think Hutch has done that. Thank you for the gift membership, Shapeen Grow. Really appreciate you. Magalag for $10. Dev, I'm dumb. So tell me explicitly where you draw the line on going after MAGA. What would be too far, in your opinion?
So, anyone in his cabinet should be investigated. Anybody who's a part of the congressional committees that have been doing the fucky shit with regards to corruption, they should be investigated. I don't think that all Republicans in the House or the Senate are actually actively a part of the problem. I think some of them are just going along with the flow. So I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about the diehard loyalists who are actually involved in the fucked shit the government is doing right now.
Okay, wait. Can I ask a question on that?
Go ahead.
Sure.
I know I asked this earlier, and you said, like, oh, it's so obviously breaking law. But let's say someone like Tulsi Gabbard or like Pete Hegseth, it finds out, like, you know, there's things that looked bad, but when we investigated them, there wasn't anything for a crime there. Do we just accept those people? Would you accept and say, okay, those people don't get prosecuted, or would you say that you would have to find a reason to prosecute them then?
I assume that the investigation was done by like a reasonable prosecutor who actually did it in good faith, and it's not all. Well, then yeah, I think we do actually have to just let that go.
Okay.
Okay. $2 from the Goodman to say Andersonville, 1864 and 1865 Union Prison Camp. Are you talking about
I
when
don't know anything about that.
Lincoln suspended habeas corpus? Are we talking about that? I'm not sure. 100 CZK. I don't know how much that is, man. From Matrix, that says, if perceived crisis warrants suppression of rules, I should start acting as the left claims they already are, not the opposite. Okay, thank you for the 100, whatever those are. Appreciate it. I guess to kind of maybe get a little more disagreement here. I worry, and I'm going to talk to you directly, Dev. Like, when people hear you say things like, well, I think we need to suspend the rules. I think that we need to, there's a time to go violent, like violence isn't against liberalism and things like that. I think a lot of people worry that just like when it comes to Nazism, a lot of people who aren't Nazis have been called Nazis, that a lot of people are going to use this as a chance to kind of go after people who aren't necessarily as left as they are and say, well, he's actually MAGA adjacent and we should go after him too, right? In the way I see this kind of like actualizing is there are a lot of Democrats right now, and I have them in my community, and I see them on Twitter, who just want Republicans punished. It does not matter whether or not they actually broke a law or not. They want blood. And how do you address that? How do you address this kind of rising need for revenge that I see in the left and the Democratic Party?
No, I mean, I completely agree with you, because I do recall what it was like in the late 2010s. Like I think everyone remembers Andy Ngo getting hit with the concrete and having his face broken open in 2019. And this is a right-wing guy. He's quite far right, and I kind of find him a little bit disgusting. But like what was done to him by left-wing activists was fucking ridiculous, right? And so there's definitely this sense among people who are very far left that anyone who's just not on board with them should be punished with violence. I'm not going that far. I understand the problem, Wick, but you can't use the existence of those people and the existence of that problem to just not do anything when it's time to actually do something. You know what I mean?
I do. The question to the rest of the panel, though, how do we address this kind of rising, and not just from far left people, but just average Democrats who's like, you know what? I'm tired of MAGA. I'm seeing my country destroyed. Something needs to be done. We got to do something. And if you can't do it the right way, well, we have to, can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. One, do we see this as an actual problem that needs to be addressed? And two, how do we address it, if so? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I think it is a problem. I think that it might be limited in terms of how many people feel that way. But I think there is a growing sentiment. The growing sentiment is bad, no matter how drastic. I think it is important. I think a lot of the frustrations are coming from, one, the fact that it just feels like Dems can't do anything. So I think winning midterms is important. But I think there's also some responsibility on Dems once they are in power to start doing things to fight back, right? I'm saying do liberal things, but you need to show the voters that it isn't hopeless. You need to convey that. I think right now there is this kind of I'm pretty young. I look at college campus, and I remember when I visited my college, because I'm only a freshman, but I visited my campus, there was protests going on for Palestine. When the Iran war happened, and this is a fairly liberal, very liberal campus. When the Iran war happened, there was no protests, and it was very weird to me. I feel like there's just this growing apathy with people feeling there's not much to be do, a lot of hopelessness, and then that segues into more radical kind of thought. I think there needs to be that's why I think winning the midterms is it's a little bit upsetting that it's the only thing we can look for, but that is the most important thing, because once we have that power and we can actually act on that power, I think that general apathy might start decreasing because people actually see things getting done.
Also, just to chime in real quick, Wick, I just think that the whole rising leftist violence thing is not really the problem that it once was. I mean, there's still violent people out there for sure, right? But
I'm not just talking about violence, though. There are a lot of people who let's talk about packing the Supreme Court, right? That seems a fairly illiberal idea on the face.
I don't know if it's not illiberal, but I definitely think it's a bad idea. It's not illiberal, but it is definitely a bad idea.
I think things would have to get a lot worse before the Congress would be willing to actually do that. So I don't know. I mean, it's possible. I mean, things seems to be getting exponentially worse by the day. So I wouldn't rule it out. But
do you think it would be illiberal to do that, Hutch?
No, I don't. I don't agree with Wick on that one. No.
Never mind. Yeah. I thought I was going to get to fight you on something.
No, Ryan, I'll fight you. Ryan, do you support packing the court? Ryan, do you support packing the court?
No, but it would, I don't know, but it wouldn't be illiberal. The court needs serious reform, and part of that might be adding more justices to the court. The court, as it is right now, is a horribly illiberal institution.
My issue with packing the courts is I feel it creates this downward spiral where every admin's now packing the court, and it ends up I don't know I don't see where that would end.
It ends with term limits. That's the only way to fix the problem in a permanent way.
But I feel let's just circumvent it and just jump right to term limits. Yeah. I know when you were talking to Destiny Hutch, there was this idea of term limits and guaranteeing a Supreme Court pick per president to try and remove some of the gaminess of it. I feel these are better things to do than jumping to packing the court, which has such a downward stream effect that seems so just destructive to a point where in the attempt to try and make the court less problematic, we end up weakening the court to the point where it's just so incredibly effective.
It would honestly be best to pass a constitutional amendment so that the American voters chose new Supreme Court justices, maybe every 15 years or something I don't know what it would be, but something like that. I think because right now you still have to go through the Senate. So what does it even look like to change it so that every president gets one pick? Because what happens if you get another McConnell when there's a president there and they just don't give him a hearing? But to Wick's question, it's an interesting dilemma. The fact that the Democratic voter base right now, there's a lot of anger. I think there's a lot of radicalization. It's palpable. The base want their pound of flesh. They're, really fired up. They're really angry. That's producing a lot of really good election results, as we see in the turnout numbers, but it's causing a kind of tension, a kind of friction, because the next Democratic president, when whoever the nominee is in 2028, you can't just appeal to the base when you run for president. Every single president makes some kind of pivot to the center, including Trump, every time he ran in some ways that might seem counterintuitive. But, so like you have to acknowledge that anger and you have to take action. And I think like we will, once we take back the House, and I'm pretty sure we will. I feel pretty bullish about the Senate right now. We have a blueprint for what happened. Like, look what happened in 2018. We hauled up members of the cabinet in front of Congress on live TV basically every fucking day. We impeached Donald Trump. We're probably going to impeach multiple cabinet members with a democratically controlled House. And I'm almost positive we'll probably impeach Donald Trump again. And so I think like once they see that, they'll feel less like impotent. Like, I don't think there's much that you can do about that rage right now while we're out of power. Like, the best thing the Democrats can do to assuage those voters is to take power and then use that power to harass this administration.
Well, when it comes
that actually leads into my question that I had before.
Go ahead, Dev.
Yeah, so let's assume, hypothetically, it's 2028. The Democrats have the presidency only. They don't have the House. They don't have the Senate. Because I know that you guys talked about going after the Republicans using Congress. If they don't have Congress, would you guys support the executive branch just doing it themselves?
Not if it came from
maybe.
Not if it came from the president. If the president got up there and issued a directive, I think that's bad. That's a bad thing that would just blow up in his face. If it's, if he appoints Jack Smith and he gets confirmed and Jack Smith decides that he finds evidence of crimes and he, pursues legal charges, then yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but that's effectively the same thing.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is, though. I think there is a big difference.
I think Republicans will understand that as being the same thing.
Well,
if that's what you're worried about, Republicans understanding it as being
they'll consider it either way.
To be clear, I'm not. We shouldn't do anything to try to make Republicans feel good. It's not about that. They're always going to say that it's partisan, it's corrupt, it's political, whatever. It's more about.
You're concerned about the electoral implications, though.
Yeah, but more for swing voters, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about there's 40% of the country are independents, and so I'm talking about them. And if you take any action that is perceived as spiteful, vindictive, overly partisan, corrupt, then you just end up hamstringing the already lame duck president, I guess.
You don't think that they would understand Jack Smith being appointed again as special counsel to be a political thing?
Well, I mean, there's varying degrees. There's varying degrees of this. I do think there is a significant.
It's a counterfactual. We don't know. Again, like I was saying earlier, there's only so much we can look into the future when it comes to predicting future impact of policy decisions on electoral outcomes. I just think, in that case, if you were to literally appoint Jack Smith again to do this, I think that would probably be effectively the same thing.
If you made him attorney general and then he appointed a special counsel, there is a proper, there is a proper way to do it. And if it comes from the president, then I think that you will have less independents that think that the investigation would be bogus or invalid or, overly political or partisan.
Well, as I've already said more than enough on this panel, I don't want it to come from the president for other reasons anyway. So.
I mean, yeah, that's why I'm incredibly skeptical of the president doing it. I think we've seen one. I feel I don't know what the president could do that I wouldn't consider a huge amount of executive overreach. The most he could do is stuff like appoint an attorney general, that attorney general launch prosecutions. But I feel like Ryan was saying, it's better done through Congress. I mean, if we have to, it's fine. But I would prefer Congress, number one. Number two, I don't know how much reforms can get passed, and that is a scary thing. But then that might even be an argument to be a president that's a little bit more conciliatory, because that tends to do better with swing voters, which will help in the midterms.
Here we could try to spice it up a little bit. My boy Jessiah, who I love, he is my boy and I love him. He proposed that the next FCC chair do what Brendan Carr is doing now. I mean, do you guys support that? Brendan Carr, using the power of the FCC to make threats to basically chill speech from networks that are giving the administration unfavorable coverage.
No, I don't. But we should punish we should try and punish the people who are making corrupt deals with this administration. If evidence is there that there was corruption, do we know what was traded behind the scenes to get these mergers approved with the Trump administration? If there was evidence that there was corruption there. Oh, sorry.
just real quick on that, like if there's evidence capture up there, but to the point, do you think that the FCC should go after right-wing talk shows and radio hosts and things like that who are spreading lies or misinformation or disinformation about I don't know, the Iran war or perhaps anything Biden's done.
The FCC, they're limited in what they can do for cable networks. Like this is only for broadcast networks.
They also cover radio. And I'm talking about the right-wing radio. Circuit,
there's like affiliates or whatever, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if there's like a path towards that you know, that goes through the like proper order, if they did violate regulations or if they did violate the law, then prosecute people who break the law and fine people who, you know, violate regulations. You should just do that across the board. But as far as, you know, emulating what Brendan Carr is doing, I mean, I took that from Jessiah to mean, I don't know, I don't want to make assumptions, but I took that to mean, you know, use the FCC to try to bully conservative media.
They with Tallarico, right? Where like they're trying to basically not air that show on TV. Also, Wick, I think North was in your chat saying that if you want more disagreement, he was willing to come on.
Maybe we might open it up later. I don't know. I just want to make sure that everyone gets their say out now. I do feel like we're dancing around some things that I think that we kind of agree on, but I think when it comes down to the brass tacks and we have how it actually manifests, I don't know if we actually do. And I'm trying to kind of find a way to kind of get to that specifically. It is hard because my original lineup would have gotten there, but unfortunately we had.
I don't think that this is something that maybe I disagree with some of the people that you've been arguing with, Hutch, is I think it's not always necessary to just do the exact same thing that the Trump administration has been doing. Sometimes that's not the appropriate response. Sometimes things don't, like for example, I think this is something that's been misunderstood or maybe not understood at all from liberals or Democrats for the last 50 years, is that the executive branch does not work for Democrats like it does for Republicans. The project of building up the unitary executive theory was in direct response to Democrats having long-term control of Congress and using that to pass a serious agenda, the Great Society program, stuff like civil rights legislation. The unitary executive theory was from the start, a move by the conservative legal movement to try and get around never being able to win in Congress. And so that's why I harp so much on emphasizing the role of Congress in all this, because the last time that liberals had a durable seat of power in the federal government, that's where it came from. And that's frankly where it's going to come from again, if it's going to happen. And so whenever we're talking about, you know, abusing the executive branch in the same way, it feels a little bit like, you know, like in Lord of the Rings, you know, we can't use it. It doesn't work for us. The ring only works for Sauron. You know, we have to destroy the executive branch. We can't use it. It doesn't work for us.
Destroy the executive branch? Can you elaborate?
We need to neuter it. It's gotten way too powerful. It needs to be effectively, reduced. I mean, not literally destroyed, but basically destroyed.
There's a common complaint that you hear from the Democratic base a lot, which is that Donald Trump seems to get everything he wants, and he, you know, bends the rules and is corrupt or whatever. He just kind of does whatever. First of all, he doesn't get everything he wants, but whatever. Even if we accept that premise, the problem is that the Republicans, because of this unitary executive theory, they can do a lot of Project 2025 with executive orders. You know, they can do it with reconciliation. They can do a lot of what they wanted to do with Project 2025 with budget reconciliation. The big things that Democrats want to do are like transformative things, like, you know, introduce a public option or do some kind of Medicare for all, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, a comprehensive, like, humane immigration reform. All of these things currently require 60 votes with the filibuster. And so that creates problems because a lot of people just don't really understand that the Republicans, they can just do a lot of what they want to do with executive power Whereas the Democrats, we're actually trying to like build things, transform government, do big, bold policy. We're much, much more aspirational in that kind of way. And it's just not as simple or straightforward or in most cases possible to do it in the same manner that Trump has so far. And so I don't know what to do about that, like, disparity. That is a big problem. Like,
we need to destroy the power of the executive branch that's been handed over for the last 50 years.
I think destroy might be too severe, but he's probably right. Like, the executive branch has gotten way too much power. I think we do need to weaken it to some degree.
I don't know. Like, would you say this even if we were in charge of the executive branch and we didn't have Congress and the Senate?
And we didn't have Congress and the Senate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how the executive branch could destroy itself.
Simply, for example, there's a lot the executive branch could stop doing, right? That it has been doing. One of the problems with the executive branch is it has been taking up more and more responsibilities and power. Governance through executive orders is a major thing, and that has been increasing for decades, actually. So one of the things, if we were serious about
I understand your question.
Executive power,
the answer is no. The answer is no, because that wouldn't actually eliminate executive power. The only thing that would eliminate executive power is Congress passing legislation to limit executive power. So if it's just a Democrat that's in the executive branch and a Republican-controlled executive branch, a Republican-controlled legislative branch, I might support limits on the executive coming from a Republican Congress. Okay. But I wouldn't say that the Democrats should just
not use those powers.
Should just not use the powers.
Use the ring until they destroy it. Basically.
Well, no. So this is sort of what I was getting at whenever I was saying, just relying on norms isn't enough. Things need to be codified, right? Whenever we were saying, like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, if it's just a Democrat that's in the chair and the Republicans control Congress, I hope that they pass things to limit the executive branch, because that would
shake your head the whole time while you're doing those executive orders that you don't like, right? Just like,
so I think until Congress limits
that
power,
would be good for us if they limit the executive. The executive for years has only been good for Republicans.
Gotcha.
I think it's fine to I think as long as you're not overly expanding or doing things that for example, I don't think next president should be doing tariffs. But if you want to use executive orders to get certain stuff done, maybe that's fine. But you absolutely shouldn't be trying to seize more powers from Congress. Things
I
that
agree with that.
Are illegal, you absolutely should not be doing. If there's things that have been ruled legal, but you want pushback, that's fine. But I think I do agree that any reform has to come through Congress, and it's fine if a Democrat doesn't necessarily want to do the reforms through the executive branch. They absolutely should not be expanding the powers, though.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
It's a moot point. I think we're going to have a trifecta in 2028. I'm feeling pretty good about that right now.
From your lips to God's ears, brother. I hope so too. I do want to just ask you about all, if this is acceptable. There's a few people who want to go real scorched earth on MAGA. I'm talking Dems who are like, fuck these guys. You guys are all just pussies, basically. You want me to open it up and bring these people on, or are you guys happy with the conversation?
Let's do it. Yeah.
If it turns into an actual screaming match, I'll probably bow out. But yeah, bring someone on.
I know one of the people coming.
Ryan's too pure for the blood sport.
No, it's okay. It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
You can say no, and I will respect.
Go ahead. Go ahead. It'll be fun for the chat.
I meant that as a genuine compliment, by the way. You're too good for this.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with these two. Welcome to the show. She's right, and Justice.
Say my real name, Whick.
Fix his name.
Yeah, you've been in chat for a little bit.
Jesus.
I see some of your comments, some of your super chats, and things like that. She's right. You said that you want to go scorched earth on MAGA, and these guys just aren't doing it for you. Can you explain what problems do you have with what they've been saying, and what would you have them do?
Hi. Use every legal option available. There is no reason not to.
Yeah, what legal options are they not using though? Is it right?
I mean, through the whole Biden term, we saw it going nice on them. We saw a weak pick in Merrick Garland. We saw the fear of alienating Republicans or conservatives by holding back and not going scorched earth and not doing everything in hopes there could be some kind of peace forged. That just didn't work out. It's not true. They relapsed anyway. They use every opportunity to abuse every avenue of power. They're incredibly litigious. Do the same back to them. It's a reverse flood the zone thing. They can't complain about every single fair, actual legal investigation at once, as well as complain simultaneously about every good democratic policy at once. Just do it all. They will burn out from outrage. As we've seen with on both sides, any of these investigations, the average person does not stay mad about them long enough for it to matter. There were no tears for Giuliani. There is no tears for Stone. There's on both sides too. Trump sues people all the time. People don't really care. Just do it, get it all done. Even if they try to complain or play victim, they don't have a case. Everyone knows it anyway. They're going to complain anyway. But it takes a lot of bad players off the board.
I don't know how to. I don't know how to.
100% agree.
I don't know how.
Go
to,
ahead, Hutch.
Well, I mean, I don't know how to reconcile what you said with the track record, because as soon as Democrats took control of the Congress, they made criminal referrals for like Steve Bannon. They impeached Donald Trump 2 times. Garland moved too slow, but the executive branch through the executive branch laid out 2 different sets of indictments against the former president, and so they convened a special subcommittee just to investigate January 6th. And so like Democratic states and democratically aligned groups sue the Trump administration constantly. Like, you say that the Republicans are super litigious, but so are Democrats, and we've been successful at blocking a number of Trump's line items on his agenda. And so are you just saying just like do more of that, or
We win when we do it more. And it's
Can I
not
ask a
like the
question?
investigations to January 6th were a reason why Trump won back power again. It works
Can I
when we
ask a
do it.
question?
Do it.
So swing voters tend to like presidents that are more conciliatory. This is an argument against us doing prosecutions, but definitely is an argument to being careful with how we do it, first of all. But second of all, let's say that in 2020, in 2030, and in 2032, we lose, right? I guess my concern is when we do these political prosecutions, it feels like that's the outcome that we risk, that we lose because of these political prosecutions. Do you think that is a risk or no?
No, we do not lose because of political prosecutions.
So I just do not agree. Again, I'm like, there's pollsters that show that like when presidents do stuff that aren't like, people like swing voters especially much prefer conciliatory presidents. And I think this type of thing doesn't address why MAGA was frustrated. It doesn't address why they were able to rise up. I think the focus doesn't need to be on prosecuting. It needs to be focusing on a general restoring of faith in institutions.
Prosecuting doesn't teach them a lesson. Their voters are never going to learn a lesson. But it
If I
stops their
could-
agents from doing it.
Wait, what's the purpose of it? If it doesn't teach a lesson, then why are we doing it?
The real
Stops them from
answer.
doing harm. It removes them from the board, and they face consequences for what they did.
So what about future people? What about like this? Then this just seems to me it's like, okay, we deal with the problem now, but in the future, what is going to happen?
Okay. I want to give a chance for
So
other people to respond here, right? And then we're gonna get Justice. We're gonna get you in a second, right? I promise.
Okay.
I know Ryan was keying in as if he wanted to have a few things, and I want to see what Dev has to say. Go ahead.
I love you
If
too,
we-
Wick.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
No, Ryan, I'm calling on you.
Oh, I thought. Okay, yeah. If I could, I think. I'm sorry. She's right. Is that? But yeah, opened up the comments by saying, all legal means, right? I'm not sure how much daylight there really is between what she's saying and what we've been saying. I mean, because we're not talking about like. I mean, I guess that's really the end of my comment. If we're limiting ourselves to all legal means, that's sort of.
Is there
that's
any
sort of the
legal
conversation we've
meaning
been
that
having?
you would refrain from?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know. What's an example? It's hard to.
So, I mean, it's very possible that Trump's going after James Comey and things like that is actually legal. I can imagine a world that's the case. Would you do something similar?
I don't know. I want this type of stuff to come from Congress. Ideally, it shouldn't come from the president. I don't think it would be good long term if it came from the president.
Sure. Well, that's an example of something that might be legal, right? Very legal, very possible. But refraining from doing so might be the right move. But if that's the end of your comment,
Yeah.
let's see what Justice has to say. If you guys
So
are like,
yeah,
go ahead.
I agree that we should do things that are legal. However, I don't agree that we should uphold the previous norms I'm fully on board with President Gavin Newsom saying, "Oh, Wyoming had a wildfire and earthquake. Well, maybe we don't give you some FEMA funds. Eat shit." Stuff like that. I think we should go full MAGA in the blue direction and just make them shit on the consequences because they quite frankly deserve it.
That
And
feels-
I'm just curious, who
feels-
agrees with that here? If Wyoming has an earthquake or a wildfire, because they voted Trump and because they voted MAGA, we just don't give them FEMA funds.
No, we
it's a great way
deliberately
to
the FEMA
destroy it.
funds.
I think it's
Just
a great
like
way to
Donald Trump
destroy
did.
any electoral path in the future with swing voters. I think it's a great
Why?
way to do it.
No one cares about Wyoming. They only have 3 electoral votes. Politically inconsequential.
I don't
Would you
think
do
it would.
that?
I don't think it would lose us elections, but I don't think that we should do it. I think that would be a bad, immoral
Yeah,
thing to do.
We just prioritize FEMA. We just prioritize FEMA response to the blue counties of North Carolina, and the red counties. We'll get to them eventually.
I feel
Maybe
like
after
you're
the
just.
election.
I'd like to point out,
oh
like,
my
we
god,
critique
what a
Trump all the
giga
time.
Chad.
You're just like, okay, let's be Trump, guys. Let's be Trump. Sure. I mean, if you want to, I feel like then what are you fighting against?
Yeah.
Like, who gives a shit,
Blue
right?
Trump,
Wait,
baby.
to
Why?
be clear then, you have no right to critique anything from Trump, right? Because you don't care. It's not about
I
him
absolutely
doing something
do.
wrong on principle. It's about who he's doing it for. That's all you care about, and just say that.
No, I'm talking about we should do to the Republicans what they've done to us.
Does everybody? I'm just curious. Does everybody on the panel agree that if America is to get on a better track, it would necessarily require restoring a lot of faith in government among the electorate? You don't think so?
No.
So hang on. So this can just continue indefinitely, like this hyper-polarized kind of state of the country?
Well, it won't continue indefinitely. It'll be the Republicans will either learn their lesson and start acting to seek to restore previous norms and be like, hey, maybe we should actually. Oh, I'm sorry, Hutch. Did the middle of my statement interrupt the beginning of yours? Yeah, exactly.
That's fine.
So
Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I think that if the Republicans start eating the shit that they've been giving us for like the last 30 years, where ever since Bill Clinton, they've gone out of their way to do things that are quote unquote legal, but norm breaking, like endlessly investigating the Clintons over Whitewater. By the way, that's how the Lewinsky scandal came out, because they went from investigating corruption in Whitewater for like 6 years to figuring out if the president got a blowjob in the Oval Office.
And it backfired.
Yeah,
we talked about. Did George W. Bush win the presidential election? Did they win the Congress?
There was a midterm
Yes,
before
they did.
then. There was a midterm before
Didn't they
them,
win
and
that?
the Democrat.
Oh, no, hold on.
Hang on.
Respond. Let Hutch respond now.
Oh, they still got everything they
Give us a
wanted.
second,
Oh,
Justice, please.
no.
Hang on, hang on.
You gotta, hold on, hang on. You gotta let Hutch respond. Go ahead.
There was a midterm in '98 that happened during the impeachment trial, and the Democrats picked up 5 House seats and didn't lose any seats in the Senate. That is very abnormal for a incumbent party in the second term. That was like a crazy good midterm performance. Everybody understands that everybody that was old enough to remember the discourse at the time understands that did backfire. The fact that the Republicans won a future election, that doesn't negate the harm that it did in that moment.
Yes, they got a short-term setback and that accomplished their long-term goals. Yes, we agree.
But do you agree that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, did you know that Hillary Clinton, for example, she reached her peak approval during the impeachment process?
Okay.
And then she went on to win it. She went on to win a Senate seat in New York and was like a titan in the Democratic Party for like over a decade. So, they literally made her stronger by doing that.
Sure. Quick question. Did the court?
Ryan, what are you doing
What was
here?
that face, Ryan? Jesus.
I was doing that for a super chat. Sorry, my bad. Someone was telling me. Someone was telling me.
Hold on, $10 from Pondering Politics.
Quick question. I have a quick question for Hutch.
Before you go, $10 from Pondering Politics says Whick. I only got for like 44 minutes, but I might pop in for a bit.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah. So, quick question to Hutch. During Hillary Clinton's popularity, did we have a liberal Supreme Court?
I'll be right back, you guys.
No, we did not.
Oh, okay, so
I don't understand.
Wait, okay.
I don't understand the point
Can
you're
we
making.
just to recenter this? Like, here's the issue. What you're arguing for justice is like you're arguing to be like, let's just act like Trump, But how Trump has acted is not benefiting him. It's electorally weakened him and allowing us to get into power. If you want to do that, that's fine. But acting like Trump has not been working, and Democrats are going to regain the House and Senate, and maybe even the Senate, and we're primed for a good 2028 as of now. And with that, we will have power. But why would we give up that power? Don't we want to be able to set up conditions that allow us to keep maintaining power, keep getting our agenda passed, keep doing stuff to prevent it? So what you're saying doesn't actually stop it. All it does is make people more angry and risk us losing that power.
Okay, so yes, we should do that. And here's how we do it. Ready? Once we get in power, we gerrymander Republicans out of power, just like they've been doing to us since
You are advocating for the disenfranchisement of voters, correct?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
So how is this maintained? You're not abandoning illiberalism to maintain liberalism. Wait, you're not abandoning...
Because I'm okay with adopting the Republican playbook to use it against them.
I mean, okay, that's fine. But to be clear, you're not abandoning illiberalism to maintain liberalism. You're just getting rid of liberalism, right?
No, this is all legal.
Legal is not liberal, which we said several times. Just because it's legal, it's not liberal necessarily.
I only care about
going full Carl Schmidt, dude.
Wait, what was your name again? What was your name again? I can't see your name.
Who are you talking to?
You.
Oh,
he doesn't know because he doesn't know your name.
What was it?
I previously had a much more cooler nickname, but suddenly Whick stole it from me recently.
Well, I wanted you to answer what I said before. So, like, let's say the Democrats do all the things that you do. What is the path to getting to a healthier democracy when we start? Are you imagining that the Republican Party just gets completely bullied into submission and that they're just going to go along with that, and they're just going to at some point they're going to be like, okay guys, we got to get our act together?
Once they realize that Democrats aren't gonna do the hey guys, when they go low, we go high. We hold the moral high ground, even though we lost everything. Oh, once they realize we've abandoned that pussy shit, yes, they will realize it. Because the only way to beat the bullies is punch them in the face.
What do they do when they get in power? When they get in power, why don't? So if that's their attitude, why does this stop them from when they get in power to be like, well, fuck it, we gotta go harder to make sure we can never get these repercussions handed to us again?
Because they'll know that we'll go harder against them when we get in power. They'll
just start disenfranchising us. The only way to do this is complete disenfranchisement of voters, and that's just not a liberal system. One of the pinnacles of liberalism is that we don't need to resort to tyranny to maintain our system. That our system is able to have different views within it, is able to have political opposition. But you're just advocating against that.
So anyway, Dev already answered your question, Stormtwig. It was
Stormtwig. Is that what you just said?
It's a nickname of the server, but he doesn't want to fucking engage because he's too scared.
He's very feisty.
I am answering.
Come on, buddy.
You know what? Here's what you're just make it illegal to be a Republican. Lock up 1/3 of the country. Do it. Giga Chad.
No, it's not illegal to be a Republican. You can vote for whoever you want. You're just not guaranteed to get whoever you want.
I don't think this is a serious. I don't think this is a real serious conversation.
It's not a serious conversation. I agree.
I want it to be serious.
Just real quick. I want to hear from Jessiah. Jessiah's only got a little bit of time. So go ahead.
No, I'm done with date night. I'm coming to this super late. My wife is catching up on the drama with Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, so that's even spicier than this shit. Yeah, it's a fucking thing. So I only got there was an hour left. I'm an hour behind, and I'm not going to go super hard on Hutch because I think there's going to be a subsequent conversation in a couple of weeks that I'm working on where my boy Hutch and I can go hard in the paint on one another. But I do have a question from what I heard in the first 40 minutes. Just a couple of things so I can check my understanding of where everybody is, because the pardon of President Nixon was mentioned. Do we all agree that it was a mistake for President Ford to pardon President Nixon?
Yeah.
Stormwolf?
Yeah, I agree. I think
you agree with that? Got it. Okay, so that helps. What about the leniency given to Confederate leaders and Confederates post-Civil War?
That's a little bit tougher. I think so. The reason it's a little bit tougher is because given where the South was, there was a huge fear that even Lincoln had, because even Lincoln had his initial plan. I think Lincoln, we all kind of see him as a unifier, had a plan to offer at least some pathway back for for Confederates back in. And we can argue whether it's good or bad. I think it might be bad, but it's weird because there's this whole issue of the South just left. You want to try and reintegrate them while also fixing the problems. I think Reconstruction was failed in many ways. One, because I feel like it didn't do enough to protect certain people, but then it also didn't do enough to fix the problems within the South. The South was economically destitute for a good while. You have to rebuild that economy. I think there's a lot of things there that I don't know, Reconstruction is a hard thing to fully evaluate whether or not like we were too lenient on Confederates or whether or not we were too harsh on them. I know that's like kind of vague. I would say that like in some ways that we didn't handle Confederates too well and that we didn't put enough protections. In other ways, we did it ways where we drew it out too long without meaningful changes, which made it unpopular.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, certainly I agree with you that there was a sound logic to the idea that we don't want to be seen as too punitive because it could, you know, in the eyes of Lincoln at the time and his successors, you know, they were afraid that it would drag out resentment and make reintegration more difficult. I certainly agree that that's a sound rationale. Of course, we did see, I mean, that's the only timeline that we're aware of, and we did see the rise of the Neo-Confederacy. We saw, you know, Confederate sympathies resurge in enormous ways. Statues of Confederate leaders began to proliferate in the South, disenfranchisement, you know, in the post-Civil War era. So we can, obviously, the leniency we know created problems. Obviously, it's a matter of debate about whether or not it would have been better than a harsher punishment, but we do agree that the leniency approach created problems, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, we know, I think it's pretty hard to say, knowing what we know about what emerged after the end of Reconstruction, that ending it when we did had a good result.
Yeah. So, and then a couple of other things, like as far as the deterrent thing, because I know that that's something that was coming up quite often in the first 40 minutes that I got to hear. And I don't know if you were all able to resolve it in the last hour, but I would just say that, is it possible that punishing the Republicans, the insurrectionist Republicans, the Roger Stones, the Donald Trumps, is it possible that that would not create a deterrent for MAGA? Yes, I do believe that's possible. I don't know what Ryan and Dev believe. I'm sure they would agree that it's certainly possible that you can't sufficiently deter this sort of bad faith. But I reject the idea that we know that deterrence wouldn't work simply because it didn't before, because Trump was never actually punished for his crimes. Like, with all due respect to my boy Hutch, he said, well, Trump was found guilty, but he was never thrown in jail. He never actually suffered any sort of consequences of the guilty plea. He became president of the United States again. Of course, that's not going to function as a deterrent. It's not the verdict that is the deterrent. It is the punishment post-verdict that can create a deterrent. I'm not saying that it would, but I don't think it's fair to say that, oh, Trump had 34 felony convictions and it didn't deter him.
I don't know if you heard...
Wait, hold on. Let me jump in here. Hold on.
Yeah,
for sure.
I just want to just make my position clear. I'm not saying that there's no point to deterrence. What I'm saying is that using that, saying that the punishment and as far as like it being a deterrence is so urgent and necessary that it justifies sort of like operating outside the bounds of the system. Like, that's what I'm pushing back against. It's not that there's no point. I mean, I think we should prosecute criminals. In a just world, you know, anybody who committed crime in this cabinet would go to jail. And if there's state level prosecutors that see crimes, to go for it. I mean, I don't think anybody on this panel is arguing for leniency.
Well, my understanding was
that... Can I just say one thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I think one thing I brought up at the beginning, it kind of got lost, is there's also like a risk and necessity kind of balance here. And what I was saying is that's why I kind of brought up the whole corruption prosecution, because that's something I think you can sell very easily to the American people in a way that doesn't have this potential risk that like just going after like Trump and Roger Stone would have maybe. And yes, I think they should be held accountable. If you can focus on the corruption thing, it's also a way to restore faith in institutions in a way that's still liberal, that also which addresses the root cause of why MAGA rose up, which is where I think my primary focus on is understanding why MAGA rose up, why the sentiment rose up, and why they were able to get away with what they were doing.
So I want to come back to that because that's also on my list of things to talk about, because I did hear you talk about that a bit again before I had to jump ahead because I wanted to pop in before this panel ended. But again, to go back to Hutch real quick, again, Hutch, I know you say you support, you know, prosecutions, especially when they're valid prosecutions. I take you at your word there. But no, my understanding was, based on what you said in the first 40 minutes, is you were skeptical that there would be a deterrent factor if we prosecuted and punished Trump and other high-ranking MAGA Republicans. You were very skeptical that that would deter them. And you cited, again, Trump's 34 felony convictions, and you cited Roger Stone. Roger Stone never went to jail. His sentence was commuted before he came to report. Of course, there would be no deterrent. So I don't think that's a valid point to make. If you have another example, maybe like a Steve Bannon, I was thinking about this. Steve Bannon went to jail for contempt of Congress, but it was a relatively short sentence. And I can't remember does somebody remember what year it was that he had to surrender and go to jail? It was 2023, 2024, or something like that.
I thought it was
a relatively...
I thought it was during the first term, wasn't it? I could be wrong.
No. It was when Biden was in office where he had to surrender himself. But that's also in an age where Trump is still viable, right? Because Trump was not punished. Trump was the Republican candidate as well. So there was a future for Bannon in the MAGA coalition. There was a future for MAGA, even if he went to jail for a year. But again, somebody interject when they find out what year he was sentenced.
He served 4 months. And he was he reported to prison in July of 2024 and was released in October.
There was also there was a campaign guy in the first term that went to Manafort. Manafort went to prison for 2 or 3 years or something like that.
I thought Manafort was pardoned, but maybe he went to jail.
He spent like multiple years in prison, I believe. Could be wrong, but
so somebody's gonna have to correct me on that one. But again, my point is like I don't
23 months in federal prison from jailed in June 2018, released in May 2020 due to COVID-19 concerns.
So did the former national security advisor, right? Didn't Flynn go to jail too for lying to the FBI? Pretty sure he went to jail. Yeah.
I'm sorry, he got out for COVID-19 concerns?
That's what it says.
That is hilarious.
Michael Flynn did not go to jail. Although he pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, he was granted a full presidential pardon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Most of these people dodge the punishment, Hutch. So again, I take your point that it's possible that punishment won't deter them, but I think you're being overbroad with your skepticism that punishment will deter. I think you need to back off that.
Wait, hang on. Let me clarify again. I think you're gonna deter maybe some people in the MAGA movement from taking extreme positions. But it's not like strict deterrence, strict punishments. That is not going to like normalize the Republican Party. Do you agree that this is a party, this is a political movement that has been basically propagandized for decades to the extent that they now believe that literally like the median Democratic voter are either possessed by Satan or they're a communist. They want to destroy the nuclear family. They want to destroy Christianity. Like they literally believe this stuff.
And that's all the true shit. I mean, imagine the crazy shit they believe. Of course that's true. No, I take your point that it's possible that deterrence will not work at all. I'm not committed to that. And I think you're too skeptical of deterrence. I'm glad to see you walking it back a bit. And I also agree that
I'm not walking anything back, just to be clear. I'm not walking anything back. I never said there was no point in deterrence. I never said that. I said that this thing is not going to prevent Republicans from being crazy broadly. You might deter some people.
Oh, well, hold on. I want you to finish your point, but I want to get other people in the discussion. I want to hear what.
Okay, we'll hash this out in the future conversation that I'm planning with Whick. Let me go to Stormwolf real quick. So you talked about the corruption angle and how maybe a bipartisan focus on corruption will restore faith in liberal institutions by Republicans. Not only do I see no evidence of that, I actually have ample evidence to the contrary, because do you know of a recent bipartisan focus on corruption and punishing bipartisan crimes? The Biden administration. The Biden administration prosecuted more prominent Democrats than they did prominent Republicans. Bob Menendez was prosecuted by the Biden administration when it would have been politically convenient to just ignore his sins. Same thing with Henry Cuellar. That's a Democrat in Texas. We want as many Democratic Congress people in Texas as we can possibly get. Instead, what the Biden administration did was do what was politically inconvenient, and they investigated and prosecuted these people anyway. As a matter of fact, Biden's own Justice Department investigated, prosecuted, and got successfully convicted the president's fucking son. Biden could have killed that on day one. Biden could have fired the U.S. attorney appointed by Trump to investigate his son. Instead, he said, you can still stay on. Typically, all U.S. attorneys resign under a new administration so the new president can appoint them. Biden said, no, stay here, continue to investigate my only living son. And then the Biden Justice Department investigated President Biden, which was incredibly politically damaging. And do you know what the polls from Republicans said about the Biden Justice Department? Absolutely nothing. They didn't give a fuck, because here's the reality. The reality is that to a Republican in the age of Trump, it doesn't matter how many Democrats you go after. If you are going after Trump at all for any reason, you're illegitimate. And we saw that with Biden. It didn't matter how many. Merrick Garland, look at all the fucking Democrats. Look how politically painful we're making this for Joe Biden. See how good faith and bipartisan we are? They didn't care. So I have absolutely no faith that is a legitimate outcome. Well, maybe we should still pursue it anyway, but I think you should be a bit more skeptical about the buy-in you'll get from Republicans.
So I think that's a fair critique. I think I have two things in that regard. One, I think doing it through Congress can help because then there is at least Republicans on that, at least in that might help a little bit. But even then, I grant your skepticism. I understand why. That's why I think it's also about, because a huge reason why Trump won was because of swing voters feeling like, hey, shit's been really scummy. And I think it's this broad lack of trust in institutions that goes back to like after Bush and the financial crisis and all this other stuff, right? I think people feel corruption is happening and it's hurting us at the same time. I think you have to deal with both ends of this. And I think a focus on that is what happens to happen. And that's also why it's not just about going after corruption, and it's not just about also focusing on material conditions. It's also accepting there's always going to be some level of bad faith actors. And it is good to deter them, but you should also build a system that can withstand bad faith actors, right? People might not like this. I'm a liberal who thinks Trump is an authoritarian. But also, a lot of what Trump's been trying to do has been stopped by institutions, right? Like the grand jury system, he couldn't get past that. We had judges able to stop that. Courts did block his tariffs, and yes, there's issues with that. But I will say that like it does, and the new tariffs, people talk about, well, he's trying to do tariffs anyways. If you look into the laws he's citing for these tariffs, they now involve having to have commissions to investigate like whether or not the tariffs are warranted. They can't be as broad sweeping. Our institutions are, yes, getting damaged in the process, but are holding. And I think it's more of an argument to why there needs to be reforms in stopping the bad faith actors, because I don't think you'll ever be able to disincentivize completely bad faith actors.
Yeah, I want to know if Deb and Ryan agree with that. Are our institutions holding, as Stormwolf is saying? In your opinions, do you think that our institutions are withstanding Trump's assault?
You want to take that one first? I feel like you haven't been in a while.
They kind of are, but not as well as I would have liked.
I don't disagree with that. I was just saying, that's why I said they're getting damaged, but they're also stopping in many ways. And it's an argument to make them stronger as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree that we are not currently in a dictatorship, right? But we've also seen that we've seen our institutions not hold in plenty of other ways. We've seen we just talked about like the FCC being weaponized to target liberal media. We've seen blatant corruption in terms of the mergers process and the tariffs. The tariffs were stopped by the courts. So I guess that's an example of the institutions holding. But when it comes to these like companies who are, basically paying off the Trump administration to be allowed to acquire other companies, the institutions aren't holding there. So our institutions are holding in the sense that we are not currently in a dictatorship. But I think it's one of those things where you keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. Just because the last push didn't push you over doesn't mean that the next one won't.
I want to jump in on that just real quick to what Ryan just said. So the tariff example has been cited by so many people. See, look at what the court's done. Every smug MAGA, lawyer that I'm aware of, like, see, people talk about how the Supreme Court's biased in Trump's favor, but look, they cock-blocked him on tariffs. They did not stay the tariffs. When President Biden tried to forgive student loan debt, or when he tried to pass, the Department of Labor regulations that, companies either had to get their mandate COVID vaccines or weekly tests, they stayed that shit instantly. Even before they ruled against it, they're like, nope, none for you. We're going to pause this shit. They allowed Trump to continue to extract facially unconstitutional tariffs for the months and months and months and months and months that they deliberated the decision.
Almost a year,
Yeah, and it was still a 6-3 decision. We couldn't get Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch, or was it Kavanaugh? It was Kavanaugh, I think it was.
Kavanaugh,
to co-sign this shit. So even in that instance where the institution held, it was warped in the process. To Ryan's point, they go through the guardrails. No, but the guardrails buckled. There's a fucking Ford F-150 bend in the guardrail there. Yeah. And I'm not giving the court credit for that, because if it had been a Democratic administration, they wouldn't have just ruled against him. They would have stayed it immediately. They bent the contours to help Trump as much as possible.
So just two things. One, I want to hear the other example that Ryan. I'm very curious. And then this is just to all of you. Okay, if that is true, what do we do about it? But go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. So another example that comes to mind pretty quickly here is the is the Doge stuff and USAID. I mean, the damage there is done. That was abuse of power. I mean, the institutions did not hold in that instance. They just shut down an entire executive agency. That was the executive doesn't get to choose to just not spend money that's been congressionally appropriated and authorized. That's not legal. The institutions did not hold in that instance. And, because USA got shut down, millions of people are going to die. I mean, literally.
Hutch has the number.
Yeah, it's going to be
like 14 million.
Devastating to people.
So on that note, though, that's why I kind of said I don't think our institutions are like stronger. I think they are getting weakened, but they are holding enough that I think they will continue. Maybe I'm being purely optimistic. I think they will hold enough in time for us to get into power to block it. And I think that's what needed to happen, first of all. But second of all, I agree that this is an example of how our institutions are getting weakened and how there's things in our institution that need to be strengthened. But that's why I'm saying I don't necessarily know if it's about bad faith, like about disincentivizing bad faith actors versus strengthening our liberal systems and strengthening and weakening the sentiment for liberalism to prevent this from happening. Trump doesn't get away with a lot of this if the political will isn't behind him, number one. I mean, he also overestimated how much political will it was behind him, but he doesn't get away with it if the political will isn't behind him, and he doesn't get away with it if there had been like more clear laws about like if maybe the what is it called, the doctrine that they use is it the major questions doctrine?
Yeah, that's the SCOTUS.
If maybe that's like more codified, because I actually think that is a good doctrine. I'll die on that. I think that's a good doctrine. If that's codified more, right? Maybe we do have Supreme Court reform, stuff like this can help kind of weaken like the power taken away from Congress and give it back. And I think that is kind of like where I'm at. I don't necessarily know if like acting with outside of the system, aggressive like political prosecutions are necessary when there's other things that we can do that strengthen that system.
On that note, right? Something I saw you advocate for on Twitter, and since you're here, I'm going to ask you about it. You want Brendan Carr, or you note how Brendan Carr is abusing his power and going after news organizations, talk show hosts, etc., broadcasters in general, who have been critical not only of the Trump admin but of the Iran war. You've advocated, and correct me if I'm wrong, for doing the same back when we get power, to have whoever, Newsom or whoever we elect, FCC start going after Republicans and right-leaning institutions. Is that a fair characterization of your advocacy?
You talking to me?
Yeah, to you.
Oh, so you didn't say who it was. I was like, damn,
sorry,
Stormfront.
Be more clear. I've seen you arguing this on Twitter. So
no, I think so. My posture is that if there is a legitimate cause of FCC probe, investigation, or saber rattling against a viable target, so a target that's under the remit or the purview or authority of the FCC, and a case can be made for a probe or investigation or some sort of punishment into that organization, that the next Democratic administration should go full steam ahead. And so the example that I often cite is the Fox Dominion situation, right? So Fox had to pay the biggest defamation settlement in American history, $787 million, for knowingly signal boosting Trump's lies about the 2020 election. Now, during that process, a lot of that information came out in discovery, and at least one, I think two actually, that I'm aware of, including under President George H.W. Bush by the name of Sykes, but a guy by the name of Hunt, who was an FCC chairman for 4 or 5 years under President Clinton, was saying at the time that what we learned from the Dominion discovery was a sufficient basis for the FCC to probe Fox News affiliates, if not Fox News itself, because Fox kind of...
Yeah, it's the way the FCC works, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the Biden administration was extremely reluctant to do that. So at the end of the Biden administration, there was inquiries brought to the FCC that basically people were asking the FCC, will you investigate Fox? Will you investigate NBC, ABC, CBS, and a couple of others? And the Biden FCC basically sat on it and then ultimately just dismissed the cases because they had a very laissez-faire approach to the First Amendment. They're like, look, we don't want to chill free speech.
They felt it would damage the First Amendment, right?
Right. So and they just dismissed all the cases, including the ones against Fox. Brendan Carr comes in and says, well, I'm going to keep the one against Fox dead, but I'm going to resurrect the complaints against ABC, CBS, and NBC and others. And so what I do think is fair game is for the next Democratic administration to go, okay, we had a laissez-faire approach before. And again, if you look at articles about this, there people will tell you, like ex-FCC chairman will tell you, that over time the FCC has gotten more and more hands off. But there's still regulations and such on the books that they can pursue if they so choose to blow the dust off. Well, I think if like there's an FCC or if there's a Fox Dominion situation under a President Newsom or whatever,
a rule from say the 70s, right? That's never been implemented.
Or it's been implemented, but they haven't, invoked it in decades.
Yeah.
So like with the example of a Fox Dominion, of course, I am 100% supportive of a Democratic administration probing that. Now, what I don't support is a Democratic administration saying, well, fuck, I don't like Newsmax. Let's go find something that we're not aware of to punish Newsmax. It has to be, they have to actually have a legitimate basis. And again, the big example is Fox Dominion. I would not support the next Democratic administration doing what the Biden administration did. I think that they should be a bit more ruthless to make the case that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And we've tried to do it the Biden way. The Biden way didn't work. Maybe the Newsom way won't work either, but we haven't tried the Newsom way, and we are going to try it. That's my answer to your question.
Well, what exactly are we?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Hutch, please.
What exactly are we emulating? Because if things are going through the proper process, then that's fine. But I just feel like you're kind of trying to have it both ways here. So you say like, well, it would be different because we would be going after viable targets. But what you are describing is like a partisan play. It's just a very explicitly partisan sort of revenge tactic. And I
disagree.
Well, that's how you're framing it. You're saying that the next one should do what they did.
No, a partisan tactic would be to cover for ABC, NBC, CBS, and others and exclusively go after right-wing targets. I'm not advocating for that. I will never advocate or support a Democratic administration that turns a blind eye to corruption or illegality among the left or liberals or Democrats. I do not want a Newsom administration, and I don't think it'd be necessary for, like, let's say we have another Bob Menendez or Henry Cuellar to not prosecute Bob Menendez and Henry Cuellar just to give Republicans the finger. That's fucked up. I don't think that's necessary. It's not partisan because they're, again, at least according to one, if not two, former FCC chairmen, so experts who at least have done this before, there was a legitimate predicate that the FCC was aware of. I reject the idea that pursuing that would have been partisan and that the Biden FCC was obligated to take a laissez-faire, hands-off approach.
I don't think that would have been explicitly partisan, but what you're describing for the future administration would be. Because you would be saying that they should reverse the original decision to I mean, you would be breaking regular order. You would be doing something very exceptional in this moment to go after Fox in response to what Carr is doing. You can say that it's not partisan.
Let me get in the queue, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on. Oh, yeah, I'll get you in the queue. But to piggyback off that, like, if you are saying, hey, in order to prosecute our political enemies that we feel need to be put in their place, we are going to dust off a decades-old rule that we haven't used for the last 30 to 40 years in order to do this. It does feel like kind of a partisan thing because you would not do that under other circumstances, but you have, in order to go after your political enemies, you have to do that. And while it might be technically legal, they might be technically on the books, it's still just outside of the norms and breaking it in order to prosecute your political enemies.
Was it outside of the norm to prosecute Donald Trump? You and Hutch can answer this.
Well, there was no precedent, but there was no norm that you don't arrest.
Wait, what do you mean? There's no precedent?
There was no.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was no precedent for a former president facing like felony charges, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong about that. Maybe if you go back to like the 1800s, so it was unprecedented. But that doesn't mean that it was like breaking any fundamental norm. We have a norm with the DOJ where they've decided through an OLC opinion that they don't indict sitting presidents, but that never, I mean, like, if this was a norm that we don't prosecute previous presidents, then why was Nixon pardoned? He wouldn't have had to have been pardoned.
Well, that's kind of, wouldn't that be the precedent though? Like, I'm not, like, to be clear though, I'm not saying that this is I'm not saying that purely acting outside of norms is good or bad. I think it's fine to do in certain circumstances. I'm just saying that, like, the Trump president, the prosecution against Trump was not a norm. And that's fine, though, right? It's still being done within the idea of a rule of law system. And if it's being done within that kind of process, I think it's fine. I would question, Josiah, would you be able to, like, my fear is like being able to sell this to people to make it the FCC stuff to be able to like, and then what does the probe look like? Let's say that we do the probe, and like, what would that look like? Could it result in Fox News not being allowed on television?
Oh, I have no fucking idea. It could be that it could be that a license of one or more of their affiliates is revoked, or it could be that Rupert Murdoch faces some sort of legal fine or whatever because there was also a case that was made. The Clinton FCC chair said that a case could potentially be made against Rupert Murdoch as far as character is concerned, a character FCC error regulation. So I don't know. I'm not claiming.
Yeah, okay.
But my point is, and I appreciate you answering the way you did, is that simply because a thing is unprecedented or it violates or betrays a norm, because the norm is we don't prosecute presidents. That has been a norm. I mean, MAGA's right about that. President Nixon was pardoned to prevent the prosecution or potential prosecution. President Obama campaigned in part on accountability from the previous administration and never pursued criminal prosecutions of the Bush administration. It is a norm until Donald Trump was prosecuted to not prosecute the previous administration. Okay. I don't give a fuck. The question is it valid? Is the target valid? And is the breach of the norm or the establishment of a new precedent defensible? That's simple for me.
I want to give the mic to Ryan, who wanted to be put in the queue, and then I know Justice has a question as well. So Ryan, go ahead. I
definitely agree with Josiah there about the prosecution of presidents not being a norm. It was definitely not a norm. That was definitely a pretty extreme. I mean, not extreme. It was the appropriate thing to do, but it was a new thing. One thing that I'd like to lay on the table as a potential response from a new Democratic administration, in addition to what we've already talked about, would be the vigorous enforcement of antitrust law against the Murdochs, against the Ellisons, against Disney. All these it's basically just those. And they own all of our media. And we wouldn't have to worry about them so much if they didn't have so much power, and they wouldn't have so much power if we actually enforced antitrust law. So I'd just like to lay that on the table as a potential non-political way to go after these people. It wouldn't matter so much if they were if we just enforced antitrust law.
I'm going to go a bit history nerdy. I feel like the era we're in kind of reminds me a lot of the Gilded Age, and the response to that was a lot of antitrust laws, and that's where a lot of the antitrust laws in the book came from. I think it's really good to focus on that, because I think this is also part of the reason, now, I'm very young. I was only 2 when the 2008 recession happened, but the 2008 recession, my understanding is it created a lot of lack of trust in the system, and it felt like those people got away, and they got to build their trust again, and this huge issue. I think antitrust laws are actually a really good thing to be using, because I think there is this general feeling of the corporate overlords and this power they have. It's also partly why people don't have faith in the institutions, because they feel like they see this inequality, they see these people who have a lot of power and the consolidation of power, and it seems like our government isn't doing anything. So I actually think that's one of the best things you can do to restoring faith in the system is antitrust laws.
Okay, I know that Justice had a question he wanted to ask everyone, and then
because going back to what Josiah was saying, about the institutions, he made an excellent point. Is fundamentally, one side doesn't believe in institution, or only believes in institutions when they have power. They were never conservatives never care if the institutions are upholding their things. They just care that they have the reins of power, and they don't even hold themselves to any accountability or standards. We're in it all in a democratic circle. We're presuming that the other side shares our fundamental beliefs in accountability and institutions. They don't. For instance, when it comes to accountability, right? Democrats, who remembers the wonderful senator from Minnesota, Al Franken? What did he resign over? 20-year-old pictures of him fake touching someone's boobs.
I don't disagree.
The president is an adjudicated rapist.
Okay.
How do I
don't disagragree with anything he's saying.
How do I fundamentally reach over to people who have no standards other than power?
I do have a disagreement here. This idea that the other side has zero standards, that might be true for Trump and I think his inner circle and many there, but I think it is a mistake to think of conservatives and MAGA in general as having zero standards and having zero things that they care about. I don't agree with that. I think that we're seeing this in a lot of people who are turning away from Trump, right, over the Iran war. We're seeing them turn away from Trump because he didn't release Epstein files.
Yeah.
We're seeing them turn away from Trump from all these reasons. Like they don't like it when he goes after his political enemies like that.
Yeah.
Wait,
No,
I disagree with Justice's characterization
I
disagree with Justice's characterization of how we're treating this conversation. I don't think we're assuming they're going to follow the standards. I think we're saying we don't think they're going to follow the standards, but we need to remove the political capital that they have to get away with doing that, and we need to put in reforms to prevent them from doing that.
Like,
I agree, it does feel like leaders aren't following standards, but we have to stop them from being able to abuse that.
Yeah, I understand, and I want to hear from the rest of you too, the rest of the panel. I know everyone wants to speak. Well, just real quick, but because I'm seeing, and this is what frustrates me. If I might take a personal moment, right? Seeing chats and they're not unrepresentative of many people in the Democrats who just don't see the right wing as fundamentally human, and that scares me, right? Like they're like, these people are monsters, they're NPCs, they're all sorts of things. That me saying that they have standards is whitewashing Republicans and MAGA. No, we have to understand that these people are people and they have a different set of values. I mean, what do we do if we think they're just NPCs? Like, what is the option if they're not human and they can't be reasoned with? Like, what do we do? Well, anyway, sorry, this is a personal moment. Go ahead.
Well, there's.
I just
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, so I wanted to say, I agree with the idea that the conservative, the hard right in this country is really what I should be saying, not conservatives. The hard right in this country essentially does not care about principles. I mean, I'm reminded of this, like, this Why I'm Not a Conservative, which is an essay written by Hayek, who was probably closer to a conservative than any of us here. And he said, in general, it can probably be said that the conservative does not object to coercion or arbitrary power so long it is used for what he regards as the right purposes. He believes that if government is in the hands of decent men, it ought not to be too much restricted by rigid rules. And I think that's basically an appropriate description of what the hard right in this country believes. They think that power, they don't have any principles when it comes to the use of power. They just care that it's used for what they regard as the right purposes. So I guess to directly answer what you're saying, Whick, I don't think that's a majority of the country. I think that that's about 30% of the American electorate. I think that has been the case for a while. I think the system that American politics has allows that 30% to exercise a disproportionate influence in American politics. But I reject the idea that even though there's a lot of very evil people in this administration, and it was a grave moral failing of the people, including, frankly, average people who enabled it, I don't think that every conservative is like an NPC. So I reject that.
I never said they were NPCs, to be clear.
I want to jump in real quick.
Well,
I want to jump in real quick. Dev, you haven't spoken in a while. Go.
Okay, sure. I mean, I don't think that every conservative is an NPC, but I think like 99% of MAGA are NPCs. I think you can definitely make that distinction because MAGA is a cult. It operates like a cult. And if you do any sort of research into how cults operate and how to pull people out of cult-like situations, the only real way to do it, because like when they're being radicalized, you can still reach them with logic. After they've been radicalized, after they're in the cult, the only way to pull someone out of a cult is they have to basically suffer from the failures of their own conspiratorial worldview. And then after they suffer enough, after they experience enough pain, if you leave a line open to them, then you can then invite them back to the real world. You know, you talk to anybody who dealt with cults like this, and MAGA is a cult. Anyone who's done any sort of research into like, you know, crazy churches that like live in the middle of the desert, or they go to South America and they drink the Kool-Aid, right? Like these groups. The only way to help these people after they've been indoctrinated is you have to be empathetic, which is hard, and you have to basically let them fail over and over and over and over again until they get it through their thick fucking skulls that what they're doing does not work.
So
and by the way, that's what MAGA is right now. The only way out of this is that basically the only way out of this. Let me finish up. Yeah, the only way for people in MAGA to get out of MAGA right now is they have to experience a lot of pain, and that's going to come through Trump's policies, and we've been seeing that over the course of his term. But also, Stormwolf, this is why I went back and forth with you over punishments, because part of the pain will be these people have to get punished, all right? The people who have damaged the institutions, they must be punished for what they've done. And Trump not getting to do his agenda after a year of doing it is not a sufficient punishment. Like, these people have to be in fucking jail.
Yeah, so I don't, like I said before, I'm not against punishments. My issue is you also need to sell punishments to the people you're not punishing and to like swing voters if you don't want to like lose their power within 4 years and be in the same situation, if not worse. Which is why I think that like a corruption messaging could be helpful in combination with other things like antitrust laws and a lot of stuff that other people feel like makes them feel like, one, their institutions are holding people accountable for things they care about, and also making them feel like their institutions work for them materially and improve their lives. I think these are the two things that kind of need to go together. But like what Josiah was talking about with the SEC, I think that's not necessarily a bad idea if you can do it in a way that doesn't seem super politicized, and you can like lay out exactly why. Maybe like a public trial would be something that could be beneficial.
To be clear, it would be a terrible abolish the FCC is where I'm at, because I think that it's well, like, just fundamentally an anti-free state.
So another thing that I think like another proposal, and I'm not trying to like derail, another proposal I've heard that I don't necessarily know is a bad idea is like having politicians have to be like under oath when they go on like news stuff. That could be a better way to handle it, right? Or like more like journalistic ethics stuff that might not necessarily be a bad thing for shows that are claiming to be news. Like I think that like those could be other reforms we do. But like I'm not necessarily against the FCC stuff. I just have a concern of like the marketing of it. But like in principle, I don't think it's an issue.
I want to give it to Hutch, who wanted to get in, and then I want to give it to She's Right, because she's been trying to say a couple things, and I want to give her.
And she's right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just want to say, like, Donald Trump is a formidable opponent when it comes to running campaigns, but when he actually is in power and governing, he's really bad for Republicans and really good for Democrats. So the public can see what he's doing in this administration, and it's not one single thing that's bringing him down. The economy is really impactful, I think, but there's also just like dozens of just really blatant corruption things that are happening from this administration. And so I understand the impulse to want to give it as good as you get, but I don't understand how emulating those kinds of, I mean, we'll be nice and say heavy-handed tactics would be good for a future Democratic administration. I see no evidence that it wouldn't similarly make us unpopular. And so I just don't know why we would copy that. I mean, again, nobody on this panel, as far as I'm aware, is arguing for leniency or deliberately avoiding prosecuting former members of the cabinet or Republicans for fear of like being perceived as political. I'm not advocating for that. What I am suggesting, though, is that if we start operating as they do, like well outside the boundaries of acceptable behavior for an administration, we will similarly experience a backlash from voters. They will give power to Republicans again, and then we're just back on that merry-go-round. And I just want to close it with this. You know, it seems like there's two, you know, like a couple different theories of the case here. You know, like the question is like, how do we get back on track? Like, how do we get off this merry-go-round? And some of my panelists here seem to think that you do that by sufficiently punishing Republicans. And I have not seen a lot of evidence that this is going to be the thing that gets us on a better path. What seems more appealing to me is what my compatriot here, Stormwolf, was saying, where instead of further weakening the institutions that are enabling Trump's corruption currently, I say we should double down on them and strengthen them and deliver good policy. We have an opportunity right now to realign low-income voters in this country who have started to vote for Republicans. Imagine if the next Democratic administration, you know, does something really big for working-class people. I think that is.
I completely agree with you, but part of that has to be punishment. Punishment has to be part of that equation.
Yeah, does anybody here think that punishment is the only way to right the ship? My understanding is we just think it's...
That's what he's not saying exclusive, but he's saying it's necessary.
Oh, I agreed. It's necessary. Yes. I just don't think it's sufficient.
Yes.
Well, it's necessary, but not sufficient.
I think it is important, but my concern is punishment needs to be done in a way that like doesn't risk losing future elections. And I think that like if we can minimize that risk through like a less like partisan punishment system that still gets enough Republicans that they know there's going to be consequences. And
my concern, just to kind of piggyback of what Storm was saying, my concern isn't that, look, if you can prosecute these people and they have broken the law, absolutely prosecute them. That's fine. Take them to court, go through the system, all these things. But my worry is based on the rhetoric I'm seeing in the ways people want to punish others and the scope of the punishment that they wish to apply is all, look, I care about protecting my rights more than I care about punishing them. So if I have to make a choice, if there comes a point where, yeah, I could continue prosecuting, but I'm probably going to lose the election, and we're going to damage an institution so much in order to get these things that it makes it less likely that free speech will be upheld by other FCCs in the future, for example, right? Then I err on the side of protecting my rights because I love my rights more than I hate the enemy.
Well, Wick, if you believe in that, then ultimately you should be for punishing people who are currently, by the way, the current administration going after your rights, endangering your rights, breaking these institutions, and prosecuting them and showing them there are consequences to that.
But no one's arguing against this justice. No one's arguing against it.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with prosecuting people who broke the law.
And also, I wanted to push back because you said that
we got to
Donald Trump is losing
people who want in, and so
why don't you get she's right? Like you said,
yeah. She's right.
So
Go ahead.
First of all of this, we can't do what they do because what if we lose power? We don't want to appear too partisan. We don't want to use any technically allowed partisan thing on the books because it seems spiteful. Those are all arguments for leniency by definition. That's not using a power available to you. That is just the room for leniency. And second of all, it's not about punishment. The point is that it'll never get that far, right? Because as soon as you start playing their game, suddenly Republicans are going to remember this is not good, this should not be the norm, and will then happily join bipartisan efforts to regulate those out of the possibility space of actions you can take.
Wait, can I?
Yeah,
that's never going to happen. Hold on. Like, it's like, say, wrestling with a pig and saying, if I wrestle him enough, he's not going to enjoy the mud anymore. What? And also, like, this idea, right, that if we behave like MAGA does and we do the same things to them, like, the people who are punishing MAGA right now by running from them electorally are going to do the same to us. Anyway, sorry.
Wait, real quick. Fox had to settle the largest civil settlement ever. They had to settle nearly $1 billion. Did they change
787?
Did they change course at all? Or they
no, because that was a relatively that was the biggest settlement in American history. But I mean, like that's still chump change for them. Like that, I mean, there was no criminal penalty attached to that.
I'm just saying.
It's definitely the biggest settlement in American history. But yeah, I mean, it clearly the payment there was not enough to deter their actions. They were apologetic for several months afterwards, maybe a year. They avoided the 2020 shit, and they certainly don't go as hard in it as they did pre-settlement. You know, they like the shit that Maria Bartiromo and Sean Hannity were openly supporting about Hugo Chavez and Lindsey Powell and you know, hacked voting machines. None of them touched that shit nearly as much as they did before.
But their
behavior's changed somewhat.
I mean, on that one hyper specific topic. Hang on, real quick. But I also want to say the idea that if you don't punish someone through corrupt means, that is what we're talking about. Like, be corrupt. If you don't advocate for punishing someone, don't shake your head. Come on, this is obvious corruption. It's obvious corruption.
It depends on
what Brendan Carr is doing is corrupt. If you're specifically targeting people for retaliation or because you don't like their politics or because you don't like the things that they're saying, that is corrupt use of government. And you should just stand on business and just say that that's what it is. You can say it's viable.
It's not corrupt. It's not corrupt.
But the idea.
If you start doing
hold on. The suggestion that somebody doesn't endorse punishing people through corrupt means, like just because they don't want to do that means they're for leniency, is fucking ridiculous. What I don't even understand the definition of the word. at that
It's
point.
not corrupt to probe Fox News after the
In
Dominion Discovery thing.
retaliation,
He's right.
and specifically in
Respond.
retaliation for Brendan Carr and what he's doing.
She's right. Go ahead. Respond.
Why is me advocating?
Jessiah, are you? She's right.
Oh, sorry. No. I'm sorry. I forgot that's her
She's right,
username.
the ones that's got a dress.
No. I forgot you said that's her username. I thought you were saying she's right. Now I want you to respond. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry.
She's right.
My goal is to end the possibility of FCC corruption. Republicans are always going to be fine with it as long as Republicans do it. If Democrats start using these same powers against them, suddenly MAGA will freak out and they'll want to stop that and rein in the FCC's powers. So Democrats should start abusing the same powers, and at the same time, here's our bill to rein in the FCC's powers and end the possibility for corruption. Then Republicans have two options. One, sit back and scream the entire term, while Democrats do full liberal tyranny, or join in and rein in the powers, so systemically it's not an option on the board for
There's
anything.
a third option, by the way, which is, okay, wait till we get power again, and then fuck around and fuck with the Dems and completely suppress them even further. That's also a possibility, right? I'm not saying it's the most likely or that it won't happen, but you agree that's a possibility, right? They play the long game and say, well, wait till we get power again to abuse the system more.
Let's say there's a recession. Let's say there's a recession.
I just want to hear. We agree that could happen, right?
Just what is the what?
We agree. The third option is Republicans say, okay, we'll play the long game, wait till we're in power again, and abuse the FCC even worse and make it even harder for them to ever regain power again, go harder on them, and abuse the system even more. Is that a possibility?
Yes, that would be a possibility.
Cool. My issue is the risk of that possibility and the actions happening don't warrant it when there's other means we can use to hold them accountable that have a less risk and other reforms and other ways to prevent further rising up. There's always going to be bad faith actors. I'm saying let's weaken the amount of political support those bad faith actors can gain. Let's weaken the mechanisms they can use to abuse the political support, and let's pass reforms. These are the things I think that are most important to stopping this from happening in the future.
They are going to optimize their use of the possibility game space as much as possible, no matter what you do. It will always be as corrupt as possible.
So make it so that people believe liberalism works. They don't feel like they don't give two shits about the institutions. Make it feel like there's reforms that can actually block it, and yes, hold them accountable, but also hold them accountable in ways that don't risk them being able to weaponize that against us in the future.
You can't bad faith proof a political system. By definition, you just can't do that. Anytime,
you can't disincentivize bad faith fully, so it's a balancing act, right? You need to do both.
Of course it is, but you're you're simultaneously saying that there's no real deterrence to be had, but that you can institute reforms to bad faith proof the system. You can't do that. It has to be a multifarious approach. By definition, at the end of
okay, hold
Say
on.
what?
I agree with that. I agree with that. Well, I'm not saying there's no deterrence. I'm saying there's a risk of, if you do certain deterrence mechanisms, there's certain risks associated with that. And I think if there's certain deterrence mechanisms like prosecuting in different ways that can still hold them accountable without the same level of risk.
Do you know a really good way? I've got actually the best way imaginable to reduce bad faith Republican tactics and Republican politics. Every Democrat in office resign. Just give up their fucking seats. Give power over to Republicans. If you really want to reduce the risk of bad faith Republican shenaniganry, just basically make it so that there are no Democrats in power. My proposition is, by definition, the Republican Party has become a bad faith political opposition party, right? We saw that through the Clinton era with Newt Gingrich. And it accelerated with Mitch McConnell, and then it got worse with a combination of McConnell and Trump. Sure. In the face of a Democratic opposition, the Republican Party over a span of nearly 40 years has become increasingly ruthless, increasingly norm-breaking, and willing to use all sorts of tactics. I understand. Wait a minute. I understand that you want to reduce risk, but to what point, Whick? And at some point, Democrats still need to be able to maneuver. So
yes,
I'm
not asking.
Can I respond?
No, hold on. I'm arguing with Jessiah for a minute. Give me a second.
Do it.
Okay, it's my show. God damn it. Okay. I love you, Storm Twink. It's okay. Jessiah.
Sure.
I am not saying that Democrats should not play politics at all. I am okay with gerrymandering in response to the gerrymandering by Republicans. There are certain actions that I think that we should tit for tat on, to use that
Can you explain why? When you, as part of your explanation, would you mind explaining why you're okay with that but not other things?
Certainly, because this has been a norm that's been established that we've been doing for longer than I've been alive. It's something that happens all the time. And every time people think that gerrymandering is going to entirely reduce the other side from ever voting again, it never works because people move. It doesn't affect things as much as people would have you believe. And I think that while it does affect things in the short term, especially, right, there are plenty of times where it's been done back and forth. And this has just been something that we've been done for years. So that's one of the reasons I'm okay with it, because of it's just baked into the cake. It's baked into the system. Even if I want to remove it right now, it's much harder to do. It's just the costs for doing that are so high that I'm not willing to risk unilateral disarmament, even if I don't like gerrymandering at all, right? And I don't, to be clear.
Wait, so just to be clear,
well, I haven't even answered the question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Though,
Go ahead.
right? But this idea, right, that it's only been the Republicans that are escalating, and that we have no influence on what they do or how they act, is just not true. There are been a lot of things that the Republicans have done in response to Democratic escalation. And I'm not saying that's not necessarily bad, but I just have to remind you that the Democrats have some guilt in how things have been going for the last 20 to 30 to 40 years. We have done and behaved in ways that have put much more power in the executive branch than should be there, to Ryan's points and things like that. So what I am advocating for here is to, much like Stormwolf says, and there are ways that we can be successful, limit Republican power, and maximize Democrat power that have little to no risk. So why would we ever
maybe
do the things similar to what MAGA is doing, which are high risk and what I would consider very low reward? So the FCC thing, for example.
There's basically no reward right now. They get like small little short-term wins, but it's hurting them. Yeah. Like his shit is hurting the Republican Party.
Them. And for whatever reason, Jessiah wants to be like, oh, they're getting punished. I want to get punished too. Because I don't know, he thinks it's fine.
I think that's a mischaracterization of his position, to be fair.
It is, but that's
mine. I'm mischaracterizing him. We're having fun.
Wait, what did I say? Where did I say that mischaracterized yours?
This idea that you want to reduce risk, why don't every
no I specifically said that that's an extreme example. If your priority is to reduce risk, why wouldn't you just resign en masse?
Can I answer this, because I brought up the risk?
The answer well, hang on, wait a minute. No. The answer, Wick, is obviously reducing risk is important to you, but it's not the only factor. If you knew that reducing the risk of Republican bad faith shenaniganry, the best way to do it would be for every Democrat to resign from office, you'd be like, no, fuck that. The risk is worth it. You guys are going to have to deal with us, right? I'm trying to find where the line is, where your risk threshold is. That's all I was. I wasn't claiming that you wanted all Democrats to resign.
Can I say something here? The risk thing, the reason I brought up the risk thing is because I think there's supposed to be a balance between what we need to do to stop like the shenanigans and the risk of like it backfiring on us. But obviously, like you said, there is a line there. Like I said, it's about balancing what needs to be done to maintain liberalism and also what needs to be done so we don't like end up in a worse situation, is what I'm saying. So
I interject and just say for a second that doing a lot of this stuff, I don't want to punish Republicans because they're Republicans, right? I don't want to do, it is necessary to go after people because the rule of law is an essential component of liberalism. It is an essential component of liberalism.
Yes,
and so
but Ryan, part of the rule of law is prosecutorial discretion. Why do we have prosecutorial discretion? Why has it been built into our liberal system?
Finite resources.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
He's saying, why do prosecutors not prosecute certain cases?
When a crime is committed, the prosecutorial discretion is showing that our legal system sometimes doesn't prosecute. And that's by design. And we have that there. So I'm just asking you to explain, why do you think that exists in our system? Why have we built that in?
Comes to
there are two reasons.
Prosecuting powerful people. There's a lot of reasons why we could have prosecutorial discretion. When it comes to, sometimes the law might not be super fair to enforce in a given circumstance. Like if we were to try, like jury nullification, that's a common example where people cite jury nullification as a reasonable thing to do is when people in the North were charged with violating the Fugitive Slave Act. And so, there would be all sorts of goes around in the legal system in the northern states to try and not actually have those cases go to trial, or if they did go to trial, what they would do is they would just nullify the clear violation of the Fugitive Slave Act by the person that was helping the slave escape. So that's an example of prosecutorial discretion. What is an unacceptable use of prosecutorial discretion is not holding powerful people accountable because we're scared by the prospect of holding powerful people accountable.
Yeah, just real quick, what Ryan's saying, there are three reasons. I said there were two, there are three. Number one is because the prosecutor in question, like the attorney general, there's a political disagreement with the law in question. So that's why the Justice Department, the president might say, I don't want you to spend resources enforcing marijuana laws because they're libertarian or liberal when it comes to marijuana laws and they don't really want to enforce it. Number two, because of finite resources, and the prosecutors don't have the resources, the manpower, the funds to go after, do a full court press on every conceivable crime. And number three, it could be because they don't think they can get a guilty plea beyond all reasonable doubt. Those are the three reasons why you have prosecutorial discretion.
Well, based into the second one is the one I'm kind of referring to, and I think you touched on it, but I want to go into a little further, is because they think that the harms done to the system or to justice itself outweigh not prosecuting. And I understand the argument. And again, I'm not arguing for not prosecuting people, but my concern is, again, if we get into a situation where it's clear that this going after people for legal reasons, right? It's perfectly okay to go after. If it's clear that it's hurting us politically and we are going to lose elections because of it, do you stop?
Isn't that corrupt?
Is it corrupt?
I'm asking you, isn't it corrupt?
I don't know if I agree with it.
You will lose.
Like, if I will not lose the prosecution, right? But lose politically. I see like a situation where it's 2028, the House is coming up, the Senate's coming up again, and it's clear the public does not like it when we've threatened to go after Trump or threatened to go after Pam Bondi and these things, and they, even though it would be just to do so, it's like, hey, we might lose the Senate if we do this. So
Hutch,
my question is, do you do it anyway?
Hutch, well, I think it's a good question for Hutch because you two have like mind on that. I would almost say Hutch would be obligated to say that is corrupt.
Why do you do this, bro? No. We're pals, aren't we?
We are pals.
Stop strawmanning me.
Whoa.
Stop strawmanning me. I've never said take it easy on Republicans. I've never said this.
You didn't let me. No. You didn't let me finish.
Okay.
No. What I'm saying is you and Whick are of like mind that you think it would be corrupt to target people for, you say, political reasons. My question was to Whick, is not prosecuting a valid crime because of the political consequences corrupt? You got to chill, Hutch. That's what I was teeing you up to answer. Is it corrupt for someone to not pursue a prosecution because you're afraid it will cost you an election?
I think it is, yeah. I think it is.
Yeah, we can bite that bullet. But that's also like, okay, I know I keep going back to this, and I think there's valid questions.
No, I want Ryan to answer the question. I asked Ryan.
What was the question? Sorry, I was responding to a super chat.
Sorry. No, it's I get responding to super chats. Money comes first. Capitalism, baby. Hell yeah. Yeah, it comes up, and it's clear through polling. You are now convinced that if we continue to go on and prosecute Pam Bondi, prosecute Hedseth, prosecute people that you do believe have committed crimes, we're going to lose the Senate.
I think this is a useless hypothetical because I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. Hold on. I don't think it's going to happen.
Wait, sorry, yeah.
It's not a useless hypothetical, though.
Well, I mean, I don't understand the point.
I think there's ample evidence that people going at like prosecutorial, not prosecutorial.
If you do it in a corrupt way, but if you do it through the proper channels, if you do it
unpopular.
No, but if you do
I need to understand what we would be what would we be doing by winning the Senate? What would we be doing by winning the Senate?
We'd be able to pass health care. We'd be able to pass all sorts of bills that would help people's families.
We would
be able to immigration reform.
Winning the
all
Senate
these
needs to
things
come with
that are
reform.
not
It needs to come with
of-
institutional reforms.
Yeah.
Unless we're the point that I'm trying to make is that unless we're actually willing to do something with the control that we're going to have of Congress, then I don't care. I mean, prosecute
Fair
these
enough.
people, don't prosecute these people. Unless we're willing to actually make serious institutional reform and frankly go after them with the power of Congress. We need the power of Congress, at least in my world, we need the power of Congress to go after these people in a substantive way.
That's their role.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I don't know. I also think sometimes we can get a little too we don't know how people are going to react to the prosecution of corrupt people. I know I've heard Hutch say before, I don't know if it was in this debate or in a video that I saw of his, but previous administration, all the other prosecutions of Trump or Republicans, they were polling above 50% of people thought that it was a legit thing to do. And so, frankly,
Well, wait a minute.
I understand
Ryan,
you want me to
can I
engage with the hypothetical.
Can I just say real quick, this is important, because if you look at the body of the polls, yes, often the prosecutions of Trump were favored by more Americans than not, including a majority, but also poll after poll after poll showed that more Americans than not felt that there was a political valence to the prosecution. So they simultaneously felt, yeah, I think they're going after Trump in part because it's fucking Trump and they hate his guts and there is a political edge to this, but also I support them doing it anyway, slightly more than not.
But that's not going to be.
I think
100%.
that's actually an interesting argument.
That's
I
not
think
going to
that's
be
an interesting thing.
That's not going to be
Sorry,
that's not going to be 100% overlap, though. That could be just a small subset.
Based American public. That's what I have to say to that. Based American public.
I don't think anybody on this panel is against aggressively prosecuting criminals and going through the proper channels. But I think that we're not even talking about a risk assessment here. If you do it the way that this administration is doing it, it's not a risk. It is a certainty that the public will not respond well to that. And, what do you do if 3 months into Newsom's presidency or 6 months and, after the IRS has audited Sean Hannity and the FCC is threatening Fox News and whatever, what happens if there's a recession? You know what I mean? And the Republicans know for sure that they're probably going to coast to those midterms. You're just back at square one. You have not addressed the problem. You have not dissuaded any kind of behavior. Maybe you've deterred a few people from doing things, but at that point they're going to know that they're going to coast. And so without these, you're talking about these punishments, I think punishment is important in a liberal democracy. If you have a society that's structured around the rule of law, of course that matters. But to Storm's point, the more important thing to do when you get that power is to strengthen the institutions against future bad actors. That is going to go way further than punishments. And we know this for a fact because I've mentioned this a few times, but bribery just happened out in the open in American government for decades. And then they passed a slew of reforms over the course of decades, starting in 1870. They didn't necessarily they didn't necessarily go back and arrest people who took bribes, but they still did the reforms and the system got better. It got stronger. Let
me ask you this, Hutch. Here, I'm going to ask you this, Hutch. Let's say hypothetically,
and just before you do, I'll let you ask, but we are running soon.
I was gonna say, Wick, you got to cycle.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
just real quick, Hutch. Let's say, over the course of a hypothetical 4-year Gavin Newsom presidency, you get all the reforms that you want to the institutions, and you get no punishments whatsoever.
I'll take the reforms. I'll take the reforms. Yes,
I would actually call that, I think, a failure. I think you also need the punishments along with the reforms.
No. I thought you were asking me.
I
thought you were asking me if I have to pick one. If I have to pick one, I'm going to pick the reforms 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone else.
Well, I think the problem is
Anyway, I do want to respect everyone's time. I know we've had a lot going on, and I appreciate you all for coming in and again being flexible with the lineup. We've had some last minute changes, I know, But I want to give the people who I have invited on a chance to have last words, tell people where they can find you, all that. And I've enjoyed the discussion. It's got a little heated now and then, right? But I think it's healthy to have these disagreements. I think it's healthy to have these talks. And yeah, if you, dear viewer, liked the discussion, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And we have these kind of talks all the time. And we're going to set up one with Jessiah and Destiny versus if we can, Hutch and I, but whoever we can find, right? And we'll get that going. But I want to give the mic first to Dev, and then just kind of go around and let Stormwolf have the last word. Dev, go ahead.
I don't really have much of a closing. I think we kind of covered everything in the actual conversation. If you guys like lib video essays, please consider going over to my channel and watching them. It would be quite nice if you did. I think my most recent long-form video was a 2-hour video called "Was Obama Actually the Most Divisive President in History?" Because right-wingers like to claim that. And so I went over a whole bunch of Obama's past statements, and I went over a whole bunch of right-wing claims about them, and I disproved every single one of them. So if you have a spare 2 hours, feel free to slap that on in the background.
I saw the video. I can personally vouch for it. It was really good. You should go watch.
He has the definitive J6 video too. Like it's the GOAT.
Yeah, I did a 4-hour J6 video as well. Yeah.
Yes. But thank you for being here, Dev. I do really appreciate you, and you should all go give him a follow. Hutch, please.
Thank you.
I think that when we give Democrats power in November, hopefully we take both chambers, but we're almost virtually guaranteed to get the House. I think you are going to see aggressive action. I think they are going to haul members of the cabinet up in front of subcommittee hearings every fucking day like they did the last time. I think they will impeach cabinet members. I think they will impeach Donald Trump. And I do think that state level prosecutors, and to the extent that the DOJ can prosecute people, I think they'll do that in the next term. Nobody is arguing against that. But I do want to stress, if we emulate Trump's corruption, specifically his corruption, if we wield these agencies like an instrument that we use against our enemies, that will blow up in our face. It is currently making the Republican Party weaker, not stronger. We should not emulate that.
Based and true. Thanks for being here, Hutch. Really appreciate it, man. Go check him out. Let's give it to Ryan. First time. Hopefully it wasn't that bad, right? But go ahead, Ryan. Give us your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm Ryan Geddy, RyanGeddie. I'm on YouTube. I make video essays. Yeah, that's what I do. Go check me out. I'm almost to 34,000 subscribers, so you could help me push. You could help me push to that milestone.
That's awesome.
I just wanted to close by saying I just want to really re-emphasize again that liberalism is really important to me. I believe it's the best philosophy for governance that there is. I think that the American system is an attempt to put some liberal principles into practice, but the American system, such that it exists, is not liberalism itself. There are a lot of things about the American system that are illiberal and ought to be changed. I want to punish crimes that the administration has committed, not because I think it's necessary to abandon liberalism to do that. I think it's perfectly liberal to do that. In fact, I think equal protection under the law, the fact that nobody's above the law, these are clear and important liberal principles that are incredibly important to uphold. So I just, that's it, actually. Yeah, check me out. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you. And
also destroy the executive branch.
Go check him out. I love his videos. I really enjoyed his going over each of the 2028 Democratic candidates. I thought that was enlightening and well thought out. He deserves the growth he's seeing. Give him a check out. Last but certainly not least, Stormwolf, go ahead.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciated everyone here because I'm fans of a lot of you guys. I will say that, I think in general, one thing I appreciate is it doesn't feel like we're distinct in what we want to achieve and what the end goal is. I think we all want accountability. We all want to prevent this from happening in the future. I think we just disagree with how to get there, which I think is fine. I think for me, the most important thing is addressing the conditions that led to Trump getting power in the first place. And I think that's a huge lack of faith in liberal institutions. And like I said a couple times, I think that comes through restoring reforms. That comes from accountability for corruption. I think a lot of people do feel they see people on the top in this whole anti-establishment. They feel like their lives suck while these people are benefiting. So they want to see the people at the top like held accountable, which is why I believe in prosecutions. I know that might have gotten muddied, but I just believe you need to do prosecutions in a way that can minimize risk and still hold people accountable. Obviously, there's always going to be some risk, but if you can do something like a bipartisan corruption committee in Congress that then gets transferred into like the DOJ and recommendation for like prosecution, that might be a lot better, because then you have this bipartisanship, which makes it hard to see political prosecution, and you can generate support against a popular anti-establishment sentiment. But then lastly, you need to make liberalism work. You need to govern effectively where people don't feel like how they felt in 2024, where the inflation was so high that they said, well, fuck it, who cares if it's Trump again, I'll vote for him. I don't think anyone here, I think in general, that's just where this needs to be focused on. I think when we abandon liberalism, it risks a dangerous precedent and a race to the bottom to say, well, you abandoned liberalism, so I can abandon liberalism. I guess I'm very concerned about the pathway back, is what I would say.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here. Any final words from the peanut gallery? I'm looking at you, Jessiah, or Justice, or she's right.
I have to go back and listen to the previous hour, the hour that I missed.
I sent you a text, Jessiah.
Ooh, some texty text. You gonna share with the class, or are we gonna?
It's just your dick. Again.
Yeah.
What do you think?
God damn, it's already my wallpaper. It's already my wallpaper.
Just give it a rating. Right. All I'm asking is just, is it a 9?
Well,
is it
thank
8?
you. Yeah, thank you all for being here. I love you all, even though some of you are wrong, but some of you are right, and that's okay.
So, wait, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, real quick.
Yeah, I think everyone should subscribe to the channel, become a channel member, like and subscribe, and support Whick. And also, Whick, I think that Stormwolf should be on the Destiny panel. I think he'd be pretty good.
Maybe we'll see. I love you all.
That's up to.
I'll talk to you later. Okay.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Okay. Josiah agreed to a little powwow.
What up, playa?
All right, buddy. Help me understand the disconnect here, because there's some kind of disconnect here.
Listen, a little bit, but I'm saving it up for. I promised Whick that I would blow the dust off a panel, and I'm passionate about this topic, and we're gonna have you and I and Whick are gonna create it's the finale. It's the season finale. This will end the discussion, so I don't want to blow my load on it. I don't want to blow my load on it, but I'll bat some stuff around with you for now.
Well, okay. Help me understand the idea. Like, I guess to me, it is a bit of a oxymoron to say that we should emulate Brendan Carr, but against viable targets. Because to me, what the important action that we're talking about from Carr is an explicitly partisan weaponization of the FCC. He's not going after viable targets. And to the extent that the next FCC should go after viable targets, they should do that to any news station that is violating regulations and these kinds of things.
Yeah. So what I'm advocating for, and I tried to explain there, nowhere did I ever advocate for a future Dem FCC to exclusively target right-wing news agencies. Do you accept that? That's important.
Say that one more time. I got slightly distracted.
Yeah,
sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So to be clear, nowhere have I argued that the next Democratic FCC should exclusively target right-wing or even viable right-wing targets.
I haven't said that. No.
Okay. And you agree that I've not said that.
You haven't said that, but in the case of resurrecting a case against Fox, that would be an action that could only be described as partisan. It is retaliatory in nature. Would you want to do that regardless of what Brendan Carr has done this term?
Well, two things. Number one, I don't think I've advocated for the next Dem FCC to resurrect the case against Fox. I said that Brendan Carr resurrected the case, and he used basically when the FCC dismisses certain cases, they can bring them back, which is what Brendan Carr did. Mm-hmm. He chose to keep the one against Fox buried, but brought back the other ones that the Biden administration dismissed, as well as Fox. These ones just happen to be targets that Trump hates. I don't think I've ever said on my videos or on Twitter that the next FCC should resurrect the one against Fox. I don't even know if that would be viable. What I'm saying is, in the event of something like that, rather than go with a laissez-faire approach, which is what the Biden administration did, at least according to, again, 2 FCC chairmen that I'm aware of, Hunt and Sykes serving under President George H.W. Bush, that instead they need to be like, okay, those days are over. If it's a viable target and a case comes before us, instead of saying, you know what, for the sake of like being super pro free speech, we're going to engage in the equivalent of the FCC of a prosecutorial discretion and decline to pursue this. No, we will pursue this. We're going to give that a try. And I'm not advocating for the next Dem FCC to only target right-wing networks, just like I wouldn't want the next Dem DOJ to only target right-wing criminals. But what I am saying is that basically the Biden era approach of let's just stay hands off, I think that has to go away, especially in the instance of something like Fox. I'm sorry?
It wasn't just the Biden era, right? Like I looked into this a little bit. I think this is something that's been solidifying over decades, right?
It's been a process, but the reason I'm citing the Biden era is the most egregious example I can think of a right-wing failure was the Fox Dominion case, which happened on Biden's watch. Oh. And so that's the example I'm citing. I'm not necessarily advocating, because I honestly haven't thought about it, if Brendan Carr or the next Democratic FCC chairman should go back and resurrect the case against Fox. I can't say I'm not open to it. I just honestly have not thought about it because to me, it's just a done deal.
Well, I guess then it would just be a case by case. You know, I don't know. Maybe you could make a persuasive argument that you think the FCC should take a more active role in these things. And I honestly haven't looked into it enough to have like a strong opinion, so I could be persuaded. But I still
the way I look at it. Can I give you an example of how I'm thinking about it?
Well, let me just say real quick, like, I don't know what we're emulating. I still don't understand where if we're going to be applying this standard evenly across the board, then we're actually not emulating Brendan Carr, you know? So like my concern is the way that you framed it. When I look at your feed, you were very angry, obviously, and it was very much framed like we need to strike back. Am I just imagining this tone?
I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. Do you think? I don't think that striking back. I would probably consider it striking back. I just don't think there's necessarily anything corrupt. Like if you ask me, would it be striking back against MAGA or the right for a more vigorous Democratic FCC to no longer pass on colorable cases against right-wing targets? I would probably frame that as striking back, because clearly it's a change in behavior that is following Brendan Carr's more ruthless approach. But I don't think that there's necessarily anything inherently partisan or corrupt about that. That's the disconnect here. I think what would be corrupt is for a Democratic FCC to say, we're going to pass on investigating, probing, or doing inquiries or any sort of FCC enforcement against ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, whatever a left-wing or liberal equivalent is, and exclusively go after the right. I agree that would be corrupt. I agree it would be corrupt to say, you know what? I have no real valid reason to believe that Newsmax did anything inappropriate, but I'm just going to go after Newsmax because they're right wing. I agree that would be corrupt. And Brendan Carr is doing both of those things. I do not think it is corrupt or partisan to say, okay, Brendan Carr is now setting new precedents for a more vigorous, ruthless FCC. And as long as we don't skip over liberal enforcement or enforcement of liberal networks, breaches of FCC regulations, I don't think there's anything corrupt about that. I think it's just saying, okay, you have now created the precedent that the FCC is going to be much more vigorous in its enforcement, and that will cut against your preferred networks as well if the shoe fits.
Jessiah, I'm just reading your tweet here. You said you were responding to Brian Schatz, and you said, I don't know what you were replying to here, but you said, you're right, but Carr only does this because he's convinced that Democrats will never reciprocate if and when they ever return to power. Biden's FCC should have given Fox a proverbial colonoscopy over what we learned from the Dominion lawsuit. But even that is, to me, like very, very much explicitly framed in a partisan, retaliatory way. It is explicitly partisan.
So me advocating for the Biden FCC to have gone after Fox, I don't understand what the issue is here, Hutch.
Well, you said it wasn't just Fox, though. You said next Dem POTUS should fire Carr on day one and use every precedent he's established against viable right-wing media targets.
Yeah, but now you're talking about a different tweet. And again, there's no contradiction there. A viable right-wing target, as in a target that is under the FCC's remit and one that has likely violated FCC regulations.
Well, what's the point of saying right-wing? I mean, why wouldn't the next FCC chair go after viable left-wing media targets? Why did you specify right-wing media targets?
Because Brendan Carr and MAGA don't give a fuck about left-wing targets. They give a shit about right-wing targets.
And you're saying that we should retaliate by going after viable right-wing media targets.
Nowhere does that state or demand that we don't go after viable left-wing targets, especially when I'm telling you that.
I mean, you're saying that, but I don't know how to make sense of it.
Hutch, I think you're getting way too caught up in what who would not be the FCC chairman or the Democratic attorney, because let's just get down to brass tacks. Do you want Donald Trump prosecuted?
Yeah.
Why is that not corrupt? You have a specific target in mind and you want him to suffer the consequences of the state potentially depriving him of life and liberty. Because you have a specific target in mind.
Because Donald Trump, he has not received any pardon for either of Jack Smith's cases. I mean, technically, they're not like dead. The Georgia case is technically not dead. I think he committed serious crimes, and I want to see him like punished for that.
But you say you want Trump prosecuted. Why aren't you saying you want Democrats who broke the law prosecuted?
Well, you're talking about a difference between prosecutors going after crime and using the agencies as a political weapon. That's a different.
No, what I'm saying what I'm saying is that as far as your mode of objectivity, it should be even-handed, right? You don't want the FCC or the DOJ weaponized against a specific person, right?
Yeah, I don't think you should predetermine targets and then use the
I understand,
agencies.
but you have.
No,
and
I have not.
I would venture to guess that you also predetermined Trump should have been prosecuted before the cases were brought. I would bet $200.
The difference is he wasn't prosecuted because he's Donald Trump. He was prosecuted because he committed serious crimes.
He was a viable target who also happened to be named Donald Trump. And nowhere would I ever say or claim or believe that simply because Hutch has advocated explicitly for the prosecution of Donald Trump even before he was prosecuted, would I say, well, Hutch, you clearly don't want to go after liberal criminals or Democratic criminals, right? You're getting hung up on this. I am advocating for a more vigorous FCC, yes, in part to stick it to Brendan Carr and MAGA. There's nothing wrong with that. The only way that would be wrong is if the person I'm targeting is outside the remit of the FCC. Well, number one, that I would be in a position to do something about it. Number two, that the person I'm targeting or network I'm targeting is outside the remit of the FCC. And if that person did not commit any sort of FCC violation, which is why the example I gave is Fox and Dominion. Nowhere have I said or suggested simply because a thing is right-wing that they should be targeted or that left-wing targets should be excluded. Nowhere have I done that. Constantly, I talk about how awesome it is that the Biden DOJ prosecuted Bob Menendez and Henry Cuellar, even though it was politically inconvenient for the Democrat.
They investigated Ilhan, too. Because she was with paying her security or something. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, I think other members of the squad. I think like Rashida Tlaib or somebody else was also targeted as well. But like, this is where I would ask you to show some charity towards me and our friendship, and just you don't seriously think that I want an FCC to ignore anything other than Fox News and Newsmax, right?
No, I'm not saying that, but I am saying when you frame it as, is there a different example? Like, is there a different agency that surely you don't think that the next administration, whatever strategy they use, would be limited to just the FCC? So like, would you target, would you want to maybe go after Republicans with different agencies? Like, what about like IRS audits? Would you be okay with, auditing Republican members of Congress or the Supreme Court or members of the cabinet?
Yeah, I mean, well, if the IRS has evidence that they broke the law, yes. Here's what I'm saying, I guess, in a nutshell, and it applies to all agencies across the board. To whatever extent we would show restraint in the past for a viable, legitimate target, I'm saying we should no longer be bound by that. In other words, if an IRS agent says, look, I think James Lankford probably broke X number of IRS statutes or regulations. And in the past, because he's a Republican senator, we probably wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. I would say, well, did you go fishing for this? I would say if I were Attorney General Jessiah, I would say, well, how did you come across this information? And if it was a legitimate thing where we weren't going on a fishing expedition to try to find something, then I would say, well, fuck the old norms. They just destroyed those old norms. If it's a viable target and you didn't break the law or act unethically to have a predicate to investigate them in the first place, then go full steam ahead. And simply because in the past you would hesitate because you didn't want the prosecution to be seen political, those days are over. That's what I want. I want a more ruthless Democratic administration in terms of the FCC, the FTC, the DOJ, but nowhere am I arguing for a Democratic administration that skips over Democratic violations or liberal violations to focus exclusively on right-wing violations.
Do you know
That's
enough?
what I'm saying.
Do you know enough in this? It sounds like you're calling for just like a blanket policy of sort of just like unshackling these agencies and pursuing like maximal punishment for things. But that to me feels like in this specific instance, do you know why the FCC changed over time? Like maybe, like I don't, like maybe the reason why they changed over time, maybe they had really good reasons and maybe those norms are actually really good.
The overall reason is that they didn't want to chill free speech and the free press. And so, I mean, that's the overall thrust of it. I'm sure they had specific motivations for specific changes in posture and reinterpretation of regulation. But the overall thrust is they wanted to have a more laissez-faire approach to free speech and the free press.
That seems like a pretty valid reason to me. I don't know.
Sure.
Like,
sure.
And just to be clear, Brendan Carr, he has not launched any formal investigations. What he's done is a lot of bluster. He's made a lot of threats, but he hasn't actually acted on it. And what he's doing is he's just trying to chill these people with the threats. And to varying degrees.
Are you sure?
I looked it up, and maybe
send me what you have, because I saw reporting, for example, just recently that the FCC is launching an inquiry into The View, for example.
Let me look this up. FCC, The View. February 18 confirms enforcement action underway against ABC's The View, calls Stephen Colbert, James Tallarico incident a hoax. So that the agency has an enforcement action underway on ABC's The View. Okay, so that was just announced literally like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So again, I don't have all the examples.
Well, to be clear, he said we're taking a look at it. So far they haven't, like, to my knowledge, right? He hasn't actually, like, he's done a lot of threats, obviously, to try to chill speech. That's critical of the administration. That is bad. I'm not saying that that's not bad. He should be. I don't know. Can Congress impeach him? I don't know how that works. Or is that,
I assume he's subject to impeachment. I'm pretty sure I don't think there's any role in the federal government that's not subject to impeachment. I think you could probably theoretically impeach any figure. Cabinet figures aren't elected; they're appointed and confirmed by Congress, and they're subject to impeachment. So I think you can impeach pretty much anybody.
But this would be an example of a new precedent that he's setting. And with your tweet when you said use every precedent that Carr has used, so you don't mean this. So like, if the next,
if there was a viable, colorable case for enforcement against, I'm trying to think of the right-wing version of The View, maybe
the Five,
maybe Fox and Friends. No, because Jess, my friend's on there. Jess, I would never advocate for that. She's got a blank check to commit crime.
The Five.
Fox and Friends would be a good. That's exclusively right wing because there's no liberal on it. Okay. Jessica Tarlov is on the Five, so I have a soft spot there.
So if they said something that was really critical of the administration, you think it would be fair game to take the gloves off?
I think it would be. Well, no, I don't say critical of the administration. If they violated FCC regulation in the post-Carr world, or if we think they may have violated FCC regulation in the post-Carr world, then I think that's fair.
But would you go out, like, for example, like, it's one thing if they do something and you independently find it, right? But like, let's say Fox and Friends, they say some like fucking really outrageous shit about Newsom, that he fucking molested a girl or something like that. The Carr precedent would be to, in response to that, like, look at what they're doing. And if there's anything wrong with what they're doing, you like go after that full bore. That is the precedent, right?
Well, I think what he said is there was something that aired that he thought violated the equal time rule. Now, I'm sure in addition, it's because Trump famously hates The View and has targeted them repeatedly and explicitly over the past 10 years.
I mean, he's blatantly weaponizing the FCC, right? Like he's blatantly.
In your example, would I want a Democratic administration to go on a fishing expedition because Fox and Friends shit talk Newsom? No, I do think that would be corrupt.
All right. Well, that does give me clarity. I'm just saying when I read your tweet,
if Fox and Friends, which I don't even know if that would count because that's on. I don't know if they could be enforced the same way. I think you'd have to target affiliates. Fox is again kind of its own unique beast. You have to get at them indirectly. But let's say Fox and Friends was as much under the purview, let's say Fox was as much under the purview of the FCC as ABC is the FCC, right? Let's say ABC and Fox are equally under the purview of the FCC. And Carr went after The View because they violated the equal time rule or whatever it is. And so let's say Fox and Friends did the same thing. Then yes, I would want the Newsom FCC to, instead of saying, in the past, we'd probably just let this go. But I'd be like, no, the Carr precedent is you rigorously enforce the equal time rule. And this one just happens to cut against Fox. So your ass is ours.
That is really hard for me to wrap my head around, Jessiah, because what I get stuck on is I don't understand. Like, it would make sense if there were two sides at war and one of the sides employed some new tactic or some new technology that gave them some sort of an advantage, and then you try to emulate that to get similar kind of success or to defend against that new technology. Like, that makes sense to me conceptually. But in the case of the strategy, just the broad strategy of the Trump administration, blatantly weaponizing like every fucking agency from the DNI to the FBI to DOJ to FCC to FTC, like they're just weaponizing the whole fucking thing. I don't understand like the value that we would be looking. What are we reciprocating? Like, number one, I think it is a certainty that you would just make martyrs out of Fox News and you would lose a lot of normies. I don't think it's a risk. I think it is a certainty that happens. And I don't think you're going to get the intended effect. Like, I don't think you're going to chill their speech. I think they're going to position themselves as like the persecuted news station, and they'll probably win a lot of approval with like the public for that. And the public will see, similarly to how they see Donald Trump right now, they will see that as corrupt. And so I just don't understand, like, what value are we getting by copying that?
So let me ask you something. It's a bit apples and oranges, but I think it's analogous. You tell me what you think, okay? I'm curious what you think on this. Because you may be right that that it could result in politically disastrous results. I am not saying that my way guarantees anything. I'm just saying that my way hasn't been tried before. And I, like most of the Democratic base and many Democratic elected officials, are wanting a more ruthless Democratic Party despite the risks. We've tried the when they go low, we go high approach, and I just don't think it works. So I want to try something else. So let's set that aside for a minute. You mentioned the Fox Dominion lawsuit at the very end of the conversation we had. I brought it up earlier, but you mentioned it towards the end about deterred behavior. And actually, again, their behavior was somewhat deterred. Again, they didn't traffic in 2020 election conspiracies nearly as much after the defamation settlement, even now, right? They'll flirt with it, but they don't go nearly as full bore. They fired Tucker Carlson, who was their top guy at the time. They definitely changed behavior. They went from a 10 on full-blown election conspiracism down to like a 6 or a 7. That's meaningful. I wish it had been a 0, but it was a meaningful regression. Mm-hmm. Did you know that Gavin Newsom filed a lawsuit against Fox News and Jesse Waters last year for $787 million?
No, for what? What did he say? Was it defamation?
Because Jesse Waters lied or misrepresented the phone call that Donald Trump had with Gavin Newsom. I don't know if you remember this, but Trump said he spoke with Newsom.
Yeah, I do remember this now. Yeah.
And then it turned out, and Newsom's like, what the hell are you talking about? That didn't happen. And then Trump produced a screenshot, and Fox went and ran with it and said, Gavin lied, except the date was wrong, and Newsom was telling the truth. And so Newsom filed a lawsuit and said, unless I get an apology, a formal on-air retraction and apology, we're going to continue with this lawsuit. Guess what Fox did?
Did they settle or did they apologize?
They apologized. Jesse Waters went on air and apologized.
Well, that's a private suit, though. That's a
okay. So, but my question is, why did Gavin Newsom do that, in your opinion? Do you think any of it was motivated to teach Fox a lesson?
I think that was a part of it, but I also think he was trying to get his name recognition out there because he's teeing up a run.
Oh yeah, it was certainly multifaceted. That was a way that got attention, to be sure. But he made it abundantly clear. I don't have the quotes offhand, but that his whole point was, he's like, in the past I would have ignored this. Those days are over, and I will use the legal means at my disposal to teach Fox a lesson. Now, I don't think there is anything wrong inherently with that.
But imagine if he would have directed his state attorney general to do that. That is the difference here. You reduce confidence in that office when you do stuff like that. If you're doing it as a private party, anybody can sue the administration right now. There's nothing wrong with that. And
there's nothing wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with a private person filing lawsuits?
No, I don't think so. No.
You haven't complained about the lawsuits that Trump has filed against people?
Well, there's a difference between frivolous lawsuits and lawsuits that have merit. I mean, if Fox News apologized, clearly they felt like maybe there was a chance that Newsom would have prevailed in court. And so I'm not against lawsuits.
No, Hutch, you don't believe that. ABC settled with Trump. Didn't you oppose the ABC settlement with Trump?
They were capitulating to Donald Trump. I don't know what you're trying to suggest here. I think that lawsuits are a valid way for someone to get
you clearly believe that lawsuits can be abused by powerful people, be it the governor of California or the president-elect or the president of the United States, right?
Sure, but I mean, the possibility that lawsuits can be corrupt doesn't mean that his action was inherently corrupt, Jessiah.
That's my point. I don't believe that the things that I've been advocating for are inherently corrupt at all. And my point is, you don't either, even with respect to private lawsuits. Well, you were upset that ABC settled with Trump, but by your own logic, I could just say, well, there was a chance. They thought that there was a chance that Trump could beat him in court.
I thought them settling was corrupt.
No, but you think Trump filing the lawsuit was corrupt too?
Yeah, of course.
Right. Yeah. But so don't say, well, they have the right to do it. That's okay. It's fair game.
But wait, Jessiah, there is a fundamental difference between a private individual suing a news agency and using the FCC to go after Fox News. Can I just ask you, do you think what Brendan Carr is doing is corrupt?
Yes.
What is corrupt about it?
I think Brendan Carr is acting explicitly on the orders of the President of the United States to punish exclusively things that Trump doesn't like and people Trump doesn't like, and protect those he does like. I think it's a combination of all of that.
Well, even if it wasn't just about protecting, the fact that he's targeting individuals because they spoke out against the administration, that is what is corrupt. Using the agency as a political weapon is what is corrupt.
I agree.
And what you're asking. Well, hang on, just a minute ago, you said that in the Fox and Friends example that you would be okay with them with the FCC responding to the Fox and Friends, saying something really nasty about Gavin Newsom.
No, I didn't. No, go back and watch. I said no. Now, if they violated the equal time rule, which was the predicate that Brendan Carr offered, that yes, I would say that the Democratic administration should go gloves off. I specifically said,
but you're responding to speech. That's the context. You're responding to their speech. You're responding to Fox and Friends saying something outrageous about Newsom, and then you find that they violated.
No, I said specifically I don't support that. I said specifically, repeatedly, with that example and in general, I don't support a fishing expedition. I specifically said, so they just shit talk Newsom, which means we just look and we try to find a predicate to go after them. No, go back and replay the tape.
Okay, the context for what Carr is doing is that he is responding to speech, and so if the next administration, there's some nasty coverage that happens on Fox and Friends. Yeah. And then they find that, looks like maybe we can go after him for the equal time clause or whatever it is. They would be responding to speech in the same way. And it would be corrupt. It would be, definitionally.
I am not advocating for and would not support a Newsom FCC hearing Fox shit talk Newsom, just insulting or talking shit about Newsom, and then them saying we need to find something that we can hit them with to teach them a lesson. We look, oh shit, they violated the equal time rule. I would not support that. I've said that multiple times.
So you're saying off the rip, as soon as he's inaugurated, the FCC announces that they're looking into the equal time rule or whatever.
No, I'm saying that if they have evidence. I'm saying that, look, the FCC, they monitor all these groups, right? The shit doesn't happen in a vacuum. They watch Fox, they watch ABC, they watch NBC. The people in the FCC are monitoring this. People can bring complaints to the FCC. They're not blind. They see this shit happen. Kind of like, again, the Fox Dominion case. The reason that the Fox Dominion case, in my opinion, should have been probed by the FCC is because it was out in the news. The FCC is aware of what's going on. If they are aware that Fox News is violating an FCC rule, then yes, go after them. But if they didn't know that Fox was violating a rule, they just heard Fox shit talk Gavin Newsom, and so that just motivated them to go after Fox and find some sort of predicate, I would not support that.
Okay. That makes a little more sense. I have a little more clarity on this. I'm just saying, when I read your tweet and it says use every precedent, when I think of Carr and the precedent that he's setting, and that is what he's setting a precedent with his tenure, that they will go after people for speech they don't like. That's what I'm saying we should not do. That is corrupt and bad. It would blow up in our face. It would become a liability. It would hurt Democrats and be perceived as corrupt.
I'm saying you can go. I'm saying as the FCC, the next Democratic FCC chairman can indeed go after viable right-wing targets whose speech they don't like, but not for that reason, publicly or privately. It can't just be that the FCC chairman Jessiah was flipping through the TV one night and he heard Fox shit talk Gavin Newsom and not violate the FCC regulations in so doing. They were just insulting him, which they have every right to do. As far as I'm aware, I don't think it necessarily violates FCC rules. And going, these motherfuckers are insulting my cult leader, Gavin Newsom. God damn it, we're going to find something to hit them with.
But that's the precedent I see. That's the precedent I see when it comes to Carr. So it's good to get clarity. Because that's just what I read when you say every precedent. I'm like, well, I don't know about every precedent because they're going after people for speech, like very explicitly for speech.
I'm happy to clear that up. To me, that is not a viable target. Is not somebody. When I say viable, what I was trying to, I said this to you, I think in our Twitter exchange, and then a couple of times, I can't remember if we've had like a face-to-face conversation since then, but a target that's under the remit of the FCC that actually committed a colorable offense. It's got to be for that. I'm not advocating for a Democratic administration to simply be ignoring ABC, NBC, all the other quote unquote liberal networks, hyperfixating on the right and looking for shit to get pissed off about, and then behind the scenes sort through something to try to punish them. Basically, I agree with you. It seems to me, based on how explicit Trump is being in Brendan Carr's play, when he has the little Trump pen, that he is trying to punish The View for insulting Trump or for politically disagreeing with Trump. I don't advocate for the left or the liberal equivalent of that, where they're going after Fox.
Well, you understand that I'm glad that you're not doing that, but you understand that this sentiment is like out there in the mainstream. There's like a lot of like really big creators that I just don't think it's necessary, that are advocating for that kind of weaponization.
I don't think it's necessary. I think that you can take the shackle. This is the right wing in terms of Fox and other, let's use the Fox example relative to other networks. The reason that I think this would be so bad for Fox is uniquely bad compared to the other networks in question. CNN, MSNBC, MS Now, ABC, CBS, they've never had to pay nearly $750 or more than $750 million $3/4 billion to pay the biggest defamation settlement in American history. Fox is uniquely bad. So what I'm saying is I think a Democratic administration can just take the gloves off in general, and it will still have the intended effect because right-wing targets just happen to be morally inferior and objectively worse. Like, for example, a Democratic administration that vigorously goes after corruption, I think that it will hurt Republicans more in a lot of respects because Republican officials seem uniquely more corrupt than Democratic officials. That's why I've never advocated for only going after Republican criminals. I don't think you have to. I think you just have to make the case that in general, the niceties of us turning the other cheek or looking the other way or hesitating to appoint a special counsel because we don't want it to be seen as political, or, you know, whatever norms dominated our previous engagement with the institutions, those days are gone. We're not going to go on a fishing expedition, but it's whack-a-mole. And if your head pops up and we see it, we're bringing down the hammer. That's it.
So I think that still satisfies my conditions for partisan, because you're doing kind of the thing that I was cautioning against, but just on a macro level. So you're saying that, you know, regardless of why the norm was established, like if it has real value and if it actually like strengthens our democracy or strengthens our republic, you're not even in this calculus considering the basis of the norms. You're saying that if we get rid of the norms, it will have the intended effect of punishing Republicans. But that is kind of getting at the same kind of action, just at a more macro level. I don't think.
Wait, what's the issue? Wait, what makes it partisan and what's the issue? And wait, are you saying it's partisan or corrupt or both?
Well, both. I mean, it's corrupt because it's partisan. So like if the intended...
And why?
Because you're starting from an intended effect. You want to punish Republicans. And then you're repurposing, or you're retroactively, you know, coming up with a pretense for that. Because if we get rid of the norms just to specifically punish Republican without any, what if the norms are really good norms? Like what if we don't want the next administration to come in and then follow the precedent that we set, you know?
But we wouldn't be specifically punishing Republicans because we would not be ignoring liberal or democratic or progressive violations of the law.
But you just said a moment ago that the intended effect of disregarding all the norms is because Republicans violate the regulations and the law more, that would be a way to punish them in a kind of legal, or in a kind of like viable way, I guess.
I'm saying it would certainly have the effect, in my opinion, of punishing them more, because I think they're more likely to engage in criminal and corrupt behavior that is subject to punishment. Right. But Hutch, you did the same thing. You have actually explicitly advocated for the same thing with your attorney general pick. You know that, right?
Well,
yeah.
Hold on. Hold on.
Why do you want Jack Smith? You want Jack Smith because you want him to prosecute criminal Republicans. You know that would be the intended effect, or you suspect it would. You've said as much, but you don't have to explicitly give him the order.
But we're not violating any norms by doing this, though.
So what do you mean we're not violating any norms?
By appointing an attorney general, and as long as you're just totally hands off, and if you didn't ask him, like, are you gonna, investigate Donald Trump? If you respect that separation of DOJ, you can appoint an aggressive bulldog prosecutor, but at that point, it's out of your hands. So, like, let me ask you, for example, like, if Gavin Newsom appointed Jack Smith to be attorney general, and Jack Smith decided that he felt like he didn't want to bring charges or didn't feel like he had a good enough case, would you want Gavin Newsom to fire Jack Smith?
It depends on the reason for not pursuing the prosecution. We've also had this conversation before, and you've said the same thing.
Well, that's what I mean. Like that. Let me ask you something. Like, how much?
No, wait. What do you mean this? No, you said the same thing. If Jack Smith's, yes, you did. If Jack Smith, I asked you this. I'm like, President Hutch appoints Attorney General Jack Smith. And Attorney General Jack Smith comes back to President Hutch and says,
if he said, I'm not going to prosecute because of political reasons. That's different. Because that's different.
Well, no. It's not even that necessarily, because you also agreed that one of the priorities of the Hutch administration and the Attorney General is to restore faith and trust in the Department of Justice. And so if Attorney General Jack Smith came back to you and said, President Hutch, I think that there's a case to be made here, but I'm declining to bring charges because I think if I bring charges against former President Trump, it would further erode trust and institutional faith in the Justice Department.
But I think that's corrupt. So to me, that's a legitimate.
But you also said it's a priority of the Hutch Justice Department would be to restore So if he does what you want, just not in the priority level,
I would disagree
you want,
with him. Is my point. I think it would erode trust even more if it came out that.
But that's not your
he
call
felt
to
like,
make.
If he
But-
but if he said, I think I have a valid basis to prosecute, but I'm not going to for like the health of the country and the health of the DOJ. I view that
Yeah.
as corrupt. That action to
But
me
you said-
is corrupt, and I don't agree that that would restore faith in DOJ. I think it would hurt. I think it would further erode trust. So I would have a difference of opinion there, and I would still consider that corrupt. But I would not want to fire Jack Smith simply because he declined to prosecute Donald Trump. I would
Nor
would
Listen,
want to fire
if-
him because I think that what he's doing by protecting him in that way, that would be corrupt.
What? No. Well, no, again, we walked through this before. I'm not saying that if your attorney general has a valid reason to decline prosecution, that you should fire them, because again, they're the ones who have to make the case beyond all reasonable doubt. But the two examples that I taught you and I and Pisco talked about this. It was months ago. I can't remember when it was. It was either one of our three-way conversations or when I crashed Live and Learn at some point. I gave you two examples, and one of them was that, and the other one was, what if your attorney general declined to prosecute, but your solicitor general and your deputy attorney general, so the number 2 and number 3 at the Department of Justice, said they disagreed with the attorney general's decision? Would you trust the attorney general, or would you fire them? And Pisco bit the bullet and said you'd probably have a good case to non-corruptly fire your attorney general in the event that other high-ranking GOJ members disagree with a specific decision. But you also said that it would be a priority of the Hutch Justice Department and a necessity to try to restore faith in the institutions, to strengthen the institutions, to restore public faith in justice.
Yeah.
So if the attorney general says, look, man, you said that was one of your priorities. I agree. And so I'm declining to prosecute Donald Trump. How is that not a valid reason in your mind to not prosecute Donald Trump?
I think in this in this hypothetical, the facts would really matter. So like, I would have to see, like, they would have to come in and make their case and lay out the da.
But isn't that itself corrupt by nature? Because they shouldn't have to make a case to you. You're getting involved in prosecutorial decisions.
Well, I'd have to double check the what is allowed within the boundaries of the norm, but I think what you're describing, like, I honestly don't know. I defer to the norm.
Fair enough, because we're going to have
to the norm. And here's what I'm saying. Josiah. I think that the Democrats have an incredible opportunity right now to capitalize on the corruption and criminality of this administration by doubling down on being the party that does not do those kinds of things. And so that doesn't mean avoid prosecutions for political reasons, but it does mean adhering to norms that were adopted in the post-Nixon era to separate the president's influence over DOJ. I think that, I don't know if you heard me, but I said the second the attorney general is confirmed, here's what I think President Newsom should do. He should call a press conference. He's got his attorney general standing right next to him, and he should explain why this norm exists and why it's so important. And he should look Jack Smith right in his eye and say, if I ever direct you to prosecute anybody specifically, I want you to resign and go to the media immediately. Like, I think that would actually do
sidebar. Would you also add to that? I'm curious. Would you add to that too, a threat that if I ever catch you prosecuting or declining to prosecute because of political reasons, I'm going to fire you. You better resign right now because I'll fire you.
You don't have to worry about that with Jack Smith, though, because like I don't know.
No, I'm just saying.
Have you seen the interviews where he's like, I don't give a fuck about politics. I will prosecute Democrats.
No, I'm just saying in general. I wonder if that reassurance would help too. Like, hey, listen, if I ever order you to do something political, I want you to resign. And if I ever catch you doing something political, I'm going to fire you.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that No.
I mean, they kind of help each other. You know, it's like two sides of the same coin. But like, I think that the Democrats can draw a really powerful contrast and solidify trust with maybe some voters that they've lost in recent years by doing these kinds of things. It's not going to matter to MAGA. They're still going to cry. They're still going to complain. They're still going to call everything political like they always do. But I think that something like that, like, will make a difference in the margins. And if the next person does it, maybe you do a little bit more in the margins, but like, that to me is the path to getting back to normal. If we just start broadly copying the tactics of Donald Trump, then I don't know what to me, there's no off ramp there. I don't see this future that you see where we've sufficiently punished them into submission. I don't think they're ever going to submit in that way, ever. I don't think they're ever going to do that. I don't think you can dissuade them entirely from doing that. There's always going to be these like bad faith actors that come along, and again, if we have like a recession, then it's like, the fuck are you going to do, right? You know, like, and then you don't want to blow up all these precedents even more, and then the next administration comes on and we're still on that fucking merry-go-round. So like, I think you can get justice and start to do the work of little by little, like getting the public to have more faith in these really important institutions. And I'll leave it there.
So I'm going to say this because again, I know Whick is definitely wanting us to do a grand finale in the future, and I really do, and I want to think about this more. I'm going to take everything you said at face value, and I'm going to contemplate it. I want to say some things to you that I want you to think about. I don't want you to answer now. I want you to seriously think about it to prepare for the grand finale discussion.
Hit me.
Okay. I want you to seriously consider that you might be doing some of the same things that you're afraid of. And I'll just give you an example. Again, specifically selecting an attorney general, again, in the case of Trump, that you know, or you're so confident that they will specifically prosecute one or more specific people that you consider corrupt without you ever having to give an explicit order. But you have that predetermined outcome in mind. That's why you're picking them in part or in whole. You're just not giving a specific order, number one. Number two, when and where is it okay to break a norm? We broke a norm by prosecuting Trump in the first place. There's clearly some norms you support breaking. Other norms you think are corrupt if you break. I will want to know in the future why, for non-arbitrary reasons, breaking one norm is okay, but breaking the other is irredeemably corrupt. You have not answered that to my satisfaction. I don't want you to answer now. I want you to seriously think about it. My concern is that much of your analysis is predicated on what has been done in reverse engineering. I don't know if in a world where Trump has not yet been prosecuted, but you're in the same headspace you are now, I don't know if you would be advocating for prosecuting Trump because you haven't seen the polling on it. It hasn't been done. You're able to look backwards and say, oh, actually, I think this was a good thing. Well, it's because you've seen the polling on it, right? What in a world where there's no polling, it hasn't been done, you can't look at past events, you have to be thinking forward and taking the risk. I think based on some of the things you say...
You can ask my chat, though. Like, even before there was any polling, I was on board with prosecuting Trump the whole fucking time. I think some of the early polls might have been a bit tepid, like 45% support or something. I never wavered from that.
Fair enough. But then something to think about is, why is that risk okay? And the risk of it potentially being unpopular, okay, and the risk of electoral consequences, okay, but not in other instances. I want to know these things in more vivid detail.
It's about proper versus improper. That's like there's a world of difference between doing things the proper way and doing things in a corrupt way.
But again, it depends on what you mean. If proper means by adhering to norms, then by definition, prosecuting Trump was improper. Because it was the first time a president has been federally prosecuted. I'm not religiously... By definition, you're breaking the norm.
I'm not religiously devoted to norms, and it's not that breaking a norm, that's not my definition of improper. It's a
right. And again, I don't want to hash it out here because I want to dedicate the time to it. Yeah. Because my response is going to be, well, I don't give as much a fuck about this specific norm as you do. So you're willing to break norms 1, 2, and 3. I'm willing to break 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so we're going to have to get into the nitty gritty of that.
And I want you to think,
sure,
sweet Jessiah.
You said that was where you were leaving it. Now you're reneging. You're breaking your word. You're breaking your norm. Go ahead.
Well, now you've left me with something to think. I want you to think.
You left me with shit to think about, but give me more stuff. I'm going to write it down. Can I write it down?
Write it down, yeah. I want you to take a look at the current moment.
Wait. God damn it. I'm pulling up notes. Hutch wants me to think about... Okay, go ahead.
I want you to think about the fact that we are in a political moment right now where I have multiple pollsters that I follow that are not like strictly partisan. They're pretty by the data, who are now openly wondering if it's possible that Democrats end up with 52 seats, 53 seats in the Senate. If Democrats end up with a 40-seat majority in the House, 50-seat majority in the House. I mean, this situation with Iran and the gas prices, I mean, this is horrible for this administration, catastrophic, really. And I want you to take a look at how this administration has done so far, and just take a look at the Republican Party right now. And I want you to ask yourself, has their corruption, their criminality, like actually truly like helped them in the way that you think it'll help Democrats? I don't want the answer now, but that's what that's what I want you to think about. But I do have to go now. I do have to go like right now. So
all right, I've got one last thing for you to think about. Two things. Okay.
All right.
I want you to think. I want you to be able to explain to me how what I'm advocating for Democrats to do is exactly the same as the GOP's corruption and criminality. Okay. I'll think about, because I guess I would say I reject the premise of your question. So I would need you to show me what you're saying is the exact same thing, like for like. And then the second thing, I really want you to consider that The Rise of Skywalker is the greatest of the sequels in sheer entertainment value. Not a single dull moment, a lot of Ian McDiarmid, and the Force Awakens already ruined the mythology anyway by bringing back the Sith, and for all intents and purposes,
is
and
this
the Empire.
A meme, or do you legit like The Rise of Skywalker?
I legitimately believe The Rise of Skywalker is the most entertaining of the sequels, and I stand by. That is not a meme. I swear to God.
Did you watch Andor yet?
I love it. Both seasons. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Esme, I got her to agree. She hates Star Wars, so she's not into it at all. Was not interested, but she told me to watch an anime, and so I did that. And so now we're watching Andor, and we just got to the part where he gets to prison, and she has fucking no idea how emotional she's going to be in a couple episodes. But all right,
it's fucking amazing. Yeah. So anyway, we'll talk about this.
All right. I'm glad I got clarity. I mean, what you say like does give me a better sense of like where your head's at. I still have
and
issues,
again, we're gonna hash out more of this. When we're both, it's gonna be you and me, and I think 2 others or 3 other. I don't know at this point, 1 or 2 others, and we're gonna lock in and we're gonna settle this.
Okay. I'm shaking your hand. There you go. There it is.
All right, buddy.
It's good talking to you. It's good seeing you.
Good buddy. And of course, we're boys and everything else. And if I came in hot, I wasn't meaning to. I was trying to like represent.
I like it. It gets me hot. Like when you get spicy. Right. I like it, man.
All right.
All right.
Good, man. All right. Have a good night. Bye.